One.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to this CWMU Advisory Committee meeting tonight, February 24th. Before we will do introductions with the advisory committee members. And then after that, we'll discuss some process issues and how we'll handle the meeting. With that, Mike, let's start with you.
My name is Mike Lauder. I'm the sportsman's rep.
My name's Tim Price, representing the CWMUs.
Mike Christensen, at large.
Greg Wilding, at large.
Eric Thacker, Utah State University Extension.
Clint McLean, sportsman.
Chris Robinson, representing the CWMUs.
All right, looks like we got everybody. Okay, thanks everybody for being here. As far as process, just really quickly, I think it's good to review why we're here. This committee is a committee that exists in administrative rule. And that administrative rule lays out what our role is. So I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I'll go through like some of what our role is as a committee. So the committee shall hear complaints dealing with fair and equitable treatment of hunters on CWMUs, review the operation of the CWMU program, and review antlerless failure to meet antlerless objectives and harvest. Also hear complaints from adjacent landowners, review variances, and make recommendations on public land that is inside of a CWMU. The committee's role, so everybody understands, is to make recommendations to both the division director and the wildlife board. My name is Covy Jones, and I sit on the committee, again, as a non-voting member. So the division doesn't have a vote. We just run the meeting and oversee that. Some of the things that the committee may recommend when it comes to action items, the committee can recommend a variety of things, but some examples of those are they could recommend a change in hunt dates. They could recommend a change in splits. They can recommend a change in operator. They can recommend probation, or they can recommend termination of a certificate of registration, which is the document that allows CWMU to operate. Again, these are all recommendations made to the division director and the wildlife board. Okay, so with that as the committee role, we'll review some process. So the first thing we're going to see on the agenda is we have a couple action items that are complaints against a few CWMUs. And the way that we'll handle that in process is we'll have the complainant come to the mic and explain to us what happened. In the absence of having a complainant here, Chad, I assume you'll fill that role and fill the committee in on that. Then we'll allow some time for the CWMU to get up and explain from their perspective how things went. After that, we will allot a small amount of time if there's somebody here from the public that has something to say that is pertinent to the discussion that we're having. And we'd ask to keep those comments to 3 minutes. But we'll allot that time if there's somebody here. Then we'll bring it back to committee discussion. And at any time, a member of the committee may have a question, and they may ask either the CWMU or the complainant to come up and explain things further. With that, we are going to be respectful meetings at times can have a lot of sentiment and passion. We're going to be kind and we're going to be respectful. If we can't do that, then we'll stop the process at that point and address the issue. Okay. I think with that, we can continue on with the rest of the agenda. The first complaint is with Deseret Land and Livestock. Chad, do you want to introduce that?
Yeah, I'll just give a quick summary on all of these before we.
When you come to the mic and when you speak, please let us know who you are. So.
Chad Wilson with the Division of Wildlife. I'm the Private Lands Public Wildlife Coordinator.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. Yeah, the first complaint on Deseret, there was actually two different complainants on it. The first email I got talked about not having equal access through gates in Lost Creek, and that Tom Land said that he essentially tries to keep deer on the CWMU so they don't get shot by the public. The second one that I received had 5 different items on it. One was restricted access, that the Toon property was not on the map. Side-by-side restrictions, that it was not equal for private and public in the use of side-by-sides. Locked gates, private hunters have access to gates that the public do not. Road closures, some roads are open for private hunters, and then when it comes to the public's turn, then they're closed. And then the alcohol policy, that the public is prohibited while the private appear to be able to have alcohol. And that's the brief summary. I'll let the complainants go into more detail. I don't know if you want to call them up or me, but would have Matt Lily White speak first and then Alex Silva.
Okay.
Hey, boys. Well, I'm Matt Lillywhite. Never done anything like this before. It's all brand new to me. But today I'll speak about my experience up on Deseret and how it differs from the cornerstone of the CWMU program, which is my main goal is to level the playing field between the public and the private. My neighbor drew a tag, and he works up at Deseret doing security a couple days out of the week. And he had keys to the gates up there. So before we went, they gave him special permission to use the gates. Also, Deseret Land, I had a fun time. Like, I was chauffeured around a 250,000 acre property. We got to see everything. We got to go everywhere. And it's, from a land management stance, phenomenal. You didn't see any old fencing anywhere. It's all brand new fence. There's no garbage anywhere, roads everywhere. It was great to get a tour of it. And we live in the backyard of Deseret, so we knew what we had the same winter. We had the same kill off of all the bucks. And he drew it with, I think it was 5 or 6 points. So he said, well, if I wait till I get max points, I'll be 80. So who knows if I'll be able to hunt. So let's take a gamble. And he was seeing all the bucks there. Like, he'd give me updates. Oh, that group of bucks. Oh, nope, those got shot. Oh, they're all dead now. So we went in with clear eyes about everything. We were able to camp down in Lost Creek and then just kind of use the gates wherever we wanted to go. Like, one morning it was raining. So instead of going up on the mountain, we just drove down on the pavement, hunted those fields that aren't on the maps, went and grabbed a burger, went and sat on the side of the highway up by Evanston and glassed into Deseret, hopped in that trek gate up there, and we get in there, and 2 minutes later, there's another guide up there hunting, and we get up top, and here comes the public hunters bouncing down the road, mud all over their truck, just miserable as can be. And we're like we had a couple discussions. There's a big disparity there. Like, it took them a long time to get there, and that was one of many. It also snowed just enough so that you could see every buck out there. Like, those deer stuck out. It was great. We could glass them everywhere. And God, I've got a whole bunch of notes, but I'm trying to keep it somewhat concise. So we found a good buck, a lot bigger than any that we'd seen. We kill it, and my neighbor was pumped. Like, we take it in, we take it up to the ranch house to get scored. And as soon as we pull up, the guy that was scoring it looked at it and he goes, God, I've been sending my guides out every day to chase this buck off road so you guys wouldn't kill it. I was like, excuse me? I was watching him score it, and this, like, I'm like, all right, whatever. And when we're leaving, I was talking to him on the way out, and I was like, God, what was that all about? And he goes, oh, it was Tom Land. And I was like, I don't know, who's that? He's like, that's the outfitter up there. I'm like, oh, well, that's odd. Like, huh. Like, either way, he just admitted to 2 Class B misdemeanors of harassment of wildlife and harassment of a hunter. Like, okay. And after that, I've heard a lot of mixed stories. There's a lot of people that like this feller, and most of those seem to be all the paid clients and people of that stature. The other group is where I'm at, is the people that draw and don't pay $14,000 for a deer tag. I wish I could share a specific name here, but there was a guide up there, and one of his family members drew a tag, and he said, hey, Tom's been telling us to chase a buck off the road over here. It's a dang good buck. Like, it's probably 180s with trash on it. So you ought to spend time over here hunting. And they did, and they killed it. And they were not very happy, but it's not the first time and it's not the last. People up where I'm at know what goes on up there, but they don't speak about it because this is hard. This is difficult. I've never done anything like this. And people are just non-confrontational. After I filed the complaint, my neighbor had nothing to do with this. He doesn't want anything to do with it. And his name got dragged into it. They went and pulled all the files to see who I was there with. And then they found out he was an employee up there. And after they found out who he was, his boss and Tom Land started pressuring him to get me to drop this case. And when I wouldn't, they started pressuring him a lot more and were very manipulative in what they were doing and saying to get him to get me to drop the case. And man, we just wanted to have a good hunt. We just wanted to go up there and enjoy private land how it is without all these other recreators messing everything up. I mean, just being able to see the animals how they are, just being on land with nobody else. And at the end of the day, God, I've got all these notes, but it doesn't really matter. Like, there's just a whole bunch of ways that the public is handicapped up there so that they don't kill the bucks that the paid hunters can. And it's sad. And I do customer service with my family business. We get complaints from A to Z. We take some serious and others not, but we take all of them serious. But the most serious ones, those are all on record, and we do everything we can to rectify the issue. Like, and that's my main goal here, is to make it so that the public can just have a fair chance. Like, Deseret has that property for 360 days out of the year. And all we're asking is for 5 days to get up there and just let us enjoy it. And that's what I'll close with. I just wish, or I hope that you can take all of this into account. I've got a lot of notes. I've got all the things off the CWMU rules and regulations, but man, just please help us out. And I'll close with that.
Thanks, Matt. Question, but I assume that we'll probably hold those. Okay. Chad? Alex?
Yeah.
Alex?
First off, thank you for having us and taking your time tonight to listen to our voice. I just want to start off by saying that,
Alec, would you mind just stating your name?
yes, sir, Alex Silva, representing the public.
What's your last name?
Silva,
Silva, okay.
yes, sir. I'd like to actually read my email. That'd be helpful. I know both of you have maybe read it, but before that, just to introduce myself, I actually spent about 5 years of my life living on Deseret. It was a childhood's dream. Couldn't have asked for a better experience. I got to know the wildlife very well, the areas very well. I spent nearly every day on that mountain, and my sister had drawn this tag this year, and as you can imagine, we were thrilled. Despite knowing that the bad winter had probably given us a disadvantage from prior years, but how can you turn that up? And anyway, I'm very familiar with the outfitting, and of course, I talked to hundreds of public hunters at my time there, coming through and from, and deal with certain questions they had as I worked in the check station during the hunting season. Anyway, with that being said, I'd like to just read my email that I had submitted to Chad here with the division. It says, Dear Division of Wildlife Resources, I am writing to formally express my concerns regarding the management and enforcement of regulations within the Deseret CWMU, the Deseret Cooperative Wildlife Management Unit. As a public hunter, I have experienced and witnessed several instances where private hunters appear to receive preferential treatment over public hunters, despite regulations stating that the opportunity should be equal. And the following issues are what we encountered during the deer hunt this last season, 2024. Restricted access. This probably was the number one thing that was the biggest disadvantage that we occurred. Public hunters are effectively denied access to large portions of the unit, limiting our ability to hunt fairly. Specifically, the formerly known Toon property was purchased and added to the CWMU nearly 10 years ago. Yet the map provided by the ranch does not reflect this addition. The map given to the hunters, and I have attached that. I don't know if any of you happen to have that map tonight, but it was attached to the email. This year was the same one I personally distributed to pronghorn hunters during my time working there in 2010 to 2013. This means the ranch was actively restricting state hunters from this property for nearly a decade. When I noticed the discrepancies on Onyx maps, I inquired about access from the worker at the time, and I was given a very vague and awkward response saying I could only enter the area through Hales Canyon. And if any of you are familiar with Deseret, Hales Canyon is about as far away from the main entrance in which we have access to. It's very far southeast corner of the ranch. As noted, the further and most difficult route available from the single gate the public hunters are allowed to use. During my time there, of course, I didn't know about this. I had no intentions of hunting the property until we were viewing the maps and kind of going over some of the areas that we were at and where we were seeing deer, and that's when we noticed it. And this area, if you're not familiar with it, is it's really good habitat for late season hunts, which in this case was our dates, the last of October. As Matt noted in his comments that, there are signs. It says Deseret CWMU at the bottom, and clearly notes, it's obvious that it is part of the CWMU program, but that was not something provided to us. Number two, the side-by-side restriction. The public hunters are prohibited from using side-by-sides on the unit, even if they're street legal and insured as such. And I personally witnessed the guides using a side-by-side to extract an elk and saw 4 enclosed side-by-sides at the lodge. This was kind of a big deal to us. the vehicle that my sister was able to secure for the hunt was not an optimal vehicle for some of the rugged terrain that you may occur in late season hunts. Of course, it was a pickup truck, but it wasn't. It did limit us, especially when it was snowy. And the side by side, I mean, I've seen them hunt up there. I saw them hunt up there for 4 years with a side by side. And when I saw the rules on that said no side by sides, even if street legal, that is indicated on their website, I thought, oh, I mean, they're very aware of equal opportunity. Perhaps they decided that was the route they were going to go and make their guides just use vehicles only. Unfortunately, that was not the case when we got there, and as such, we feel like we should have had the same opportunity. Lock gates, as previously mentioned, the gate at the bottom of Croydon, along with others, the one that Matt referred to when he came in from Evanston, public hunters such as myself, we were restricted from using these gates. Of course, we didn't have keys. Fortunately for them, they had keys, so they were allowed to use the gates. We were told, come in this gate, check out this gate. Likewise, to access the property mentioned above that I said, that is the most optimal way of accessing it. It's the bottom of the canyon, Croydon Canyon. Everybody knows about Croydon Canyon. It's very usable road. And of course, for us to hunt it was very, very difficult. Road closures, 2-track roads that are typically open before the state hunt had wood stacked across it, indicating do not access this road at this time. Prior to the state hunt, those are open. The alcohol policy doesn't necessarily affect me, but a lot of people do enjoy drinking alcohol in the evenings after their hunts. I have several family members that do that. It is not only in their CWMU policy, but it is standard on Deseret that alcohol is prohibited. They do not abide by that at their lodge. I've personally witnessed that. And just to conclude my email here, I truly wish that this was the only bad experience that has been ever said or had on Deseret, because it was my greatest childhood growing up there. But unfortunately, that is not the case. I've heard from multiple hunters since then, from past years, that over this last decade, people have waited years and years to draw this tag, expecting a once-in-a-lifetime experience, only to be met with unnecessary obstacles imposed by the operators. And I can only hope that they too have reached out to the CWMU board to express their frustrations. These discrepancies create an unfair advantage for public hunters and directly contradict the principle of equal opportunity outlined in the CWMU program. And I urge the Division of Wildlife to investigate these concerns and take appropriate actions to ensure fair treatment for all hunters. With that being said, this is not a first year or second year operators on the CWMU. They've been there for a very long time. In fact, they instruct other CWMUs how to operate and how to do it properly. And it is very clear that in their own rules, they are violating that. I would only hope that the board will take that into account when deciding what to do with this situation, because if it is merely a probational period, in other words, a slap on the wrist, what does it say for all the other CWMUs that inquire misconduct on? Thank you.
Thank you, Alec. Okay, with that, we have representatives from the CWMU like to speak.
My name is Michael Meek. I'm the general manager of Deseret Land and Livestock and the president of the CWMU. This is Tom Land. He's our operator on the CWMU. So appreciate the opportunity to address the concerns that have been raised, and hopefully we can respond in a way that's productive and helpful and can help everybody kind of understand our situation. So over the last several weeks with multiple issues that we've encountered with our wildlife program, spent quite a bit of time reading the law, trying to fully understand the expectations of a CWMU and the rules that go along with it. And I just want to read 23A 7-205. It says, a landowner association to provide comparable hunting opportunities. Landowner association shall provide a holder of an authorization or permit a comparable hunting opportunity in terms of hunting area and number of days. Now, the last part of that is critical and important. Comparable hunting opportunity in terms of hunting area and number of days. So enrollment in a CWMU program is a voluntary act. There's benefits to the landowner, there's benefits to the public. An enrollment in a CWMU does not create a quasi-public land. It doesn't adjudicate any managerial authority to the state or the division. It creates a comparable hunting opportunity in terms of hunting area and number of days. We've heard fair and equitable. We've heard equal, lots of things, but it doesn't create managerial authority to the state. It doesn't adjudicate rulemaking to the public or anything like that. That authority lays with the ranch. And we clearly have not delegated that to anyone else. So we have the right to have our rules and our own and our plan. So when you get your COR, it clearly repeats what says in the law. It said it is required that all hunters, including public, are given a comparable hunting opportunity in area and number of days. So when the complaints don't fall within the scope of hunting area and number of days, I can understand why they want an equal hunt, but that's outside the scope of the rule in the law. So let me address some of the specific concerns. Equal access through the gate. Look, we like our public hunters and we want them to come and have a good time. But I think any of you, when you invite somebody to your house, you expect them to come through the front door. I think we should have the same right to indicate where we'd like them to come and go. Now, there is, it states in the rule, but it's the obligation of the hunters to contact us regarding our hunt and our access. And Tom has been willing to let people in other gates when they make special arrangement, but the standard procedure is to come through the front gate, which I think is reasonable. You brought up alcohol use. Alcohol is completely outside the scope of area of land and number of days. We have the right to have our own policy on that. That's very, very clear. Just so you know, our policy is completely consistent between public and private. There's no alcohol out on the ranch. Once somebody's in their lodging for the night and done, we don't try to regulate alcohol use, but we don't supply it and it's not available. If any of our hunters are using it while they're hunting, that's opposed to our rules, and we would take care of that. Alec brought up a lot about access through Lost Creek and on the Hell Canyon property. And while I can recognize why that would be easy for them, and that's viewed as the simple way to get to that, there's reasons why we have the road closures and the policies that we have within the CWMU that we do. When we look at roads that are open and where we're going to, how we handle that, we're not arbitrary at all. And in no way, shape, or form are we trying to reduce huntable acres or the area that's available to our hunters. There's really 3 criteria that we really look at when we're looking at roads and gates and things that are open. First is hunter safety. We'd like to keep our hunters safe and not on a road that's going to endanger them. Second is protection of the ranch, which is one of the purposes of the CWMU. And the last is having satisfying hunting experiences. In order to be successful on the ranch consistently, there does need to be some work and effort and hiking involved. And so if we turn 300 cow elk hunters loose and they go down every 2-track and then it fouls up everybody's hunting experience. And so having areas that are walk-in actually improve the hunting experience on the ranch altogether. And so realistically, with the exception of the Toon property, our roads on the ranch have been the same over a 30-year period. They're what Rick Danver put into place. They've been reviewed numerous times by the division. They're part of our management plan, which is reviewed. And with the addition of the Toon property, we followed the exact same principles and rules when designing what we were going to do there. So, yep. So I'll turn some time to Tom.
So just to jump on that with the Hell Canyon deal, there's 2 main roads in Hell Canyon. There's Mud Ridge and there's the Eastern Ridge. You can drive the Eastern Ridge from the very top clear to the bottom, turn around, drive back up. 90% of the deer in Hell Canyon are on that side. Most of the elk are on the other side. Why? Because we leave that eastern side wide open. Anybody can take off from the main ranch, drive up on top of Kilfoyle, drive as far as they want, right to the Lost Creek Road if they want to. And there's roads at every one of those ridges that aren't blocked off. So to say that we block off Hell Canyon, not necessarily true. They want to hike over from one of the gates up on top or hike from that ridge where they drive out down in. You know, you guys have been up there. Some of you guys have been up there hunting before. We block off roads. We don't drive them either. We're talking about the deer hunt here, but the cow elk hunts, the Blue Fork is the nucleus of our elk herd. It's 24,000 acres of roadless ground that we don't drive in. When you come up on a guided cow elk hunt, you can't go in there. I don't let them go in there. So if you want to say that I don't treat the public exactly fair, yeah, I don't. If you come up on a guided hunt, that's a sanctuary. The guides have to go other places. So if I open up one, and actually it's 2 about 1.5 mile long roads that I keep the public from driving on when they're doing their access hunt, we do that because I used to get complaints that guys would hike out those roads and they'd be down there because they're on the edge of the Blue Fork and they're going down in to kill a cow and guys were driving on top of them. And so the consensus over time was, hey, I feel better about walking 1 mile, walking 1.25 miles and getting a cow killed than having everybody drive down there. So that's one of the reasons we block off some of the roads that we may use during the year, but most of those roads, we got over 300 miles of graded roads and another 200 plus miles of 2-tracks. There might be 70 miles, those 2-tracks are blocked off. There's plenty of places for everybody to drive. So I'll let Mike go from there and then I'll address some of the other stuff.
The last thing, as Alec brought up, side-by-sides, we're aware of the rule change that would require us to have equitable standards on side-by-side use versus truck use that will go into effect in 2025. I will say that that will not change how we approach public hunters. It might change how we guide hunts from our private, but we will not be permitting side-by-sides in the public there either. So anyway, is there any questions?
All right, I'm going to go back to the first complaint. Kind of interesting how two people feel a lot different about a situation. And he did mention that Miles is an employee of mine. Do we try to give him special treatment? No. I mean, I didn't know he was coming in and out all the gates. If I'd have known that, I would have had to talk with him. So that was news to me that he did that. When they did shoot their deer, I had no idea he was even where he was hunting, what he was doing. Security guards, the guides, the ranch hands, we got Mike over there, or Bert over there. I encourage them not to put in for tags up on Deseret. It's always a nightmare. I mean, it's the worst thing they can do. But if they do put in for it, understand something. I kind of expect you to follow our management plan. Our management plan is 7-year-old and older bulls, 5 years and older deer. You go out and shoot a young one, you know, I am going to feel like, hey, you didn't listen to our plan. You know, that was here and there. He said that I told all the guides to go scare a deer off. That's not what I said. When I saw the deer, I knew exactly which deer it was. Lived in the top of Kilfoyle. I'd seen him with a hunter the week before. I showed him a video of that deer, and I says, he was standing right next to the road. I was trying to scare him off the road. He wasn't. He was in the center of the ranch. I wasn't trying to scare him off the ranch or onto the ranch. I was trying to get him out of the road so I didn't hit him. I wasn't going to shoot him. None of my guides were going to shoot him. He was a beautiful 170-inch, 3, maybe 4-year-old jubber waiting on teeth to come back, but we're aging, he was 3 or 4. So that was how we see that different. Coerced Miles, kept calling him, harassing him. I didn't even want him involved with it. I said to the guy that hired him, I says, you know Miles is involved in this? Called me back and says, no, Miles wasn't involved in that. He's not real happy that they're doing it. And so I called Miles. Miles and I chatted back and forth, and I says, hey, if I said something or I did something to offend you, I'm sorry. I didn't realize if that's what I did. And he's like, you didn't. He said, it wasn't that big a deal. He says, if you want, I'll send you, and I can read it to you, his harvest survey. That as soon as he got the hunt over with, went into his harvest survey, and then he put his comments in there. He didn't say, hey, the outfitter was a jerk, treated me like crap, I feel like crap. He says, I did a 3 out of 5 on the merit scale, and I wished we'd have seen more deer. But, you know, we don't have very many deer. We lost 80 to 85% of our deer. And that's when we always have these complaints, is when we don't have, you know, big deer numbers. We have the deer numbers like we normally do. We don't see near as many complaints. But, you know, and like I told Chad when he first called me about this, I said, if I did something wrong, I should be punished. But I really don't. I think I had kind of a private conversation with an employee, and he doesn't feel bad about it. I don't feel bad about it. Fences are mended. We go on, and we'll learn from it, because I'm not going to let guides and security guards do what they did. Some of Alex's concerns, the map that he talks about. We give a map out at the main ranch during their orientation, and we tell them this map is not a complete map of the CWMU. How do you put 240,000 acres on a piece of paper like that? It's a little bit bigger than that, but what we use it for is to show them where the main roads are, to show them where the roadless area of the Blue Fork is, how to get from the check station up on the mountain, how to get back, because they need to come check out every day. We tell them, if you want more detail, either use Onyx or go to a hunt planner that has the exact boundaries on it. We've done that for 10 years. We've told them the exact same thing. It's the first time we've ever had a complaint about it. What was some of the other things that he complained about? Mike pretty well hit him. You know, just so you guys know, we work super hard to make sure the public has great hunts up there. And something else we do that I can share with any of you that would like to see is we send a little questionnaire out to all our hunters at the end of the year, public hunters, and say, give us a rating, 1 to 5. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, what we can do better. I've got like 149 of them on here. You're welcome to look at any of them. Just randomly go through it, punch them. 95% of them is all positive. 5%, you'll see some ones in there. There's guys that come to Deseret, hunt 3 days, do everything humanly possible, never see an elk. How can you not see an elk? We're 2 times over the population we should have. We can't please everybody. We do our very best. We work really hard at it. We want to please everyone, but we got to be really careful. We have 350 state hunters this year. Antelope numbers are just about all the way back. Within the next year, we're going to have 550 state hunters every year that we have to deal with. And now if we got to deal with their guests, up to 4 of them, being able to complain, a little over 2,000 people that can scrutinize every little thing we do, makes it pretty difficult to keep a good ranch in the CWMU. So, got more?
But no, just the only other thing is I'd say we try really hard to do great for the public. We try to have a good operation. I think if you look at the standard that's in the law, I don't think we've violated any rules or laws. But we appreciate any feedback we get. So thank you.
All right, before we go on to if anybody else is here from the public, do we have any questions for either Matt or Alec or Mike or Tom from the committee?
I have a quick question for Chad. And then I probably will have some questions for Mike and Tom. So might as well stay over there.
Yeah, I wasn't an option, Mike.
You're always an option, Chad. The division convened a CWMU rule committee that was then taken through the public process. When does that rule go into effect? Or has it already gone into effect?
So it was passed by the Wildlife Board in June of last year. I don't know the exact date, but it takes time for the governor to sign it. So it's usually a couple months later. I did have a conversation with Deseret and other CWMUs saying with the lateness of that, like some of these things probably are going to be more enforced next year than that hunt season. So, and I think side by side was one of them that I said, like just to get all the ducks in the row that late, like technically I think some of the hunts started before it officially got signed into rule.
Okay, thank you. That helps me a bit.
Mike, there may be something I can help clarify here too. And that is the interpretation of the word comparable. And I see, Mike, your interpretation of the word comparable. But if you go later in the rule where it outlines the committee, if you go to our 37-17, it specifically talks about this committee's role. So 37-17 4A, it says hear complaints dealing with the fair and equitable treatment of hunters on CWMUs. And so that's the standard we hold for comparable. Is it fair and is it equitable? And what would the fairness or equities or inequities be? And so I feel like that's relevant information for everyone to consider as we talk here.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Sure. So the law creates the scope and the limits of the rule. Is that correct?
It's a combination of the code, the rule, and the actions of the CWMU.
Can the rule exceed the scope of the law?
The rule can further define code.
Okay, but the code defines it very articulate and specifically as comparable hunting opportunity in terms of hunting area and number of days. I don't think that was unintentional. I think it's intentionally very limiting that is the scope of the law. Otherwise, how do we create equal opportunity? We can't control Buck, Boone, and Crockett score. We can't control all the other little details that happen within the hunt from one to the other. If you exceed that, you're getting into the management of the CWMU,
Well, and
which is not within the scope of the law.
I understand what you're saying, but you can't get all the intent of code from code. That's why there's intent language. That's why there's rules. That's why there's other things. And specifically in this, the further intent of that is to hear about the fair and equitable treatment. Now,
So I'll also argue that we are fair and equitable, and we go above and beyond in many ways to do this.
and those are the merits that we want to talk about tonight. I just want this committee to know that that's the standard that we're held to in the further definition in rule.
Well, in all due respect, I don't see how you can exceed the scope of the law in the rule.
I don't think we are, is what I'm saying. I'm saying that the rule further defines code, and here are the things that we're supposed to look at. I mean, in code, there's nowhere where it talks about the number of permits. There's nowhere it talks about, I mean, all that is set by the wildlife board.
No, I agree with all that.
And so,
But when you're talking about equality of hunt, the law itself defines what that means.
there are further definitions. in rule.
There's a lot of other things in the law that addresses that, but when it comes to landowner association shall provide a comparable hunting opportunity, it's definitively limiting into what that means as hunting area, a number of days.
I understand what you're saying, Mike. And there's the argument that something are just landowner rights. And I don't know that this debate is going to help us fix anything. What I'm saying
I think
is,
my point in bringing it out is we've heard equal opportunity, equal opportunity, equal opportunity. And the reality is as a CWMU owner or president and trying to manage it, there's no way that I can give everybody an equal hunt. That's an impossible standard. So the law is limiting to what that means because that is something that we can concretely do and can be held accountable for. Everything above and beyond that is subject to your opinion, my opinion.
until you write it down, and put it in a rule. So when you make a rule that says we do not allow alcohol on our ranch, and you send that out to everybody.
We do. That's
and
true.
then it's observed. I mean, you can argue that's beyond the scope. It is beyond the scope if you weren't putting it in a rule, and then we say that's inequitable treatment.
So our treatment is the same to everybody. We don't police anybody's trailer when they're camping on the ranch. We don't police if they're in their lodge and in their housing, then we don't police it. When they're out hunting, it's not permitted on the ranch, period.
And I'm not trying to attack the CWMU. What I'm trying to say is for this committee, our guidance is to look at how, if they're treated fairly and equitably, not that they have an equal hunt, because that's dependent upon the hunter. And I understand that. And I think we all understand that. But how were they treated?
But my only point is we heard a lot about fair and equitable. And I'm saying this is how you determine fair and equitable. You look at the law and you hold us to that standard. And I think when you do that, we've clearly passed the bar.
Okay.
So I have a question for probably Mike. You said that it needs to be a comparable area, that the area comes into play. Do you think that includes access, or does that just include the area of land?
So we provide access through roads within the ranch to the entire place. Every place can be reached.
It can be reached. What time's your check-in in the morning for hunters? An hour before light. Are there areas of the ranch that cannot be accessed within 1 hour before light?
The Hell Canyon, probably, yes, that's probably true.
So if that area is not accessible during the most optimal time to be hunting, then that's when it becomes an equitable issue, in my opinion. And so that's just one point. And then the other point I would like to ask is, why did the public hunter he had keys because he's
He was
a
an
guide.
employee
He's an employee.
of the ranch.
And so as an employee of the ranch, was he using those keys to access those areas as a hunting guide? When he was
not
a
guide,
hunting,
he was a security guard.
okay. Do other
when-
hunting guides use keys that open those gates to access the
Of
ranch in
course.
those areas?
Of
Okay.
course.
So, okay, so that's a good clarification for me. I'm just gonna go, so then I'm done. The elk hunters, you said that there's 2-track roads that are closed off. Are those roads open for access to pack animals out? Some of those roads that are closed to the public? Okay, so the CWMU can use those roads to access to retrieve,
The state hunters out.
but
State
only,
hunters
did I read that Deseret charges $400 to do that? Is that not?
Where'd you read that?
Okay,
No.
I apologize.
Yeah.
I apologize. That's why I'm clarifying.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and it's just like you wouldn't let me get through when you asked about, it's not fair that they can't get help. Yeah, why don't they just camp? We let them camp on the ranch. They can camp and they can be there in 20 minutes. I mean, we give them every opportunity. It isn't like we say, I don't want you there. Please don't go there. They have every opportunity, and we guide all the bull hunters. We are this close to guiding all them deer hunters if this keeps going on, you know, but then we had throw in a whole new set of things. Oh, you don't take us to where all the 350 bulls are. You don't take me to where the 190-inch deer are. You're going to have just a whole, which is fine. We'll deal with that when it comes. But
Well,
Mike, we bust our butt to make sure that these guys have a fair and equitable hunt. If we block a road off, it ain't because he didn't like it. He loved it being closed off. It was fair and equitable to him, but maybe it wasn't to him.
And I bring up the access because there's a mandatory check-in time at what, as you stated, 1 hour before. So then the other thing that I had was, let's see, where is it? Are there road closure times different between September, October, and November? Are there seasonal road closures on the ranch?
Yep.
Okay.
Ask why.
What's that?
You want to ask why? Because of weather. I mean, there's roads that are just dangerous up there. Early September, when we do have some of our state elk hunters up there, early September, they're wide open. Now, late October, when I got the guy with oxygen that has to get one step out of the truck and shoot, I'm not taking him up Kilfoyle. I'm not taking him up Lost Creek. It's going to close.
I don't know that anybody's expecting you to take the guy with oxygen up some dangerous road.
Well,
I
that's why
don't
we-
know.
that's why we
I was
closed.
not insinuating that. So, but the intent there is there are areas of the ranch that get closed down to the public as their hunts roll in later on.
Or to the private. And plus, we have public hunters there early. If they opt and can hunt early, they can come early.
Okay. Well, those are some of the questions I had, and you guys answered them, and so I'll turn it over to anybody else on the committee.
I have some discussion questions for the committee, but none for Chad or Mike or
Tim, you have a,
Tom.
A question.
I've got a question for Mike and Tom. I think we'd be lying to ourselves if we didn't say that Deseret was the crown jewel of this program. At least one of the top 2 or 3 ranches that's part of this program. And I've had some amazing experiences at Deseret. But that being said, you guys probably have the most to lose. And as far as revenue, I'm guessing that you're one of the top revenue producing ranches through a wildlife program. And I think I would, trust me, it's hard to be perfect. I'm sure that none of us can be, right? And I know you guys really try hard and do a lot of great things. But I think I would love to see you guys equalize this more. And I know that might not be the scope of the law, but I think you guys would not have problems if you had these public hunters in with your private hunters and they're being guided and they weren't being kept from anything. I think And I get that that's going to be a burden and it's going to cost you money, but you guys have a whole lot to lose. Maybe not. I mean, it's a church ranch. So I guess, however much money it is, it's probably not that much, but we've hunted it as a family, as a private hunter and as a public hunter. And I didn't feel what these gentlemen did. And I feel bad that they had this kind of experience. And I think some of that is quality. I really do. Like if someone has a bad experience and shoots a 190-inch buck, they probably don't care. But from my perspective, I think you guys would be better served to treat these public hunters equally to your private hunters.
And forever, since 1992, since I've been there, we've guided all the elk hunters and we put them in our lodge with them. The hard part was legislature just passed a law that said you got to have like a guest. I got 19 bull hunters. Now they got to have a guest. I got 38 beds to put them in. Okay, scatter those out over the weeks. Well, you've only got so many weeks, really starting the 1st of September to the end of October. And so you put 22 hunters a week, and a few guests in there. We do that, Tim, just so you know. The elk hunters can come over actually a 4-week period. We give them their choice when Tyson's talked to them. They come September 1st. You want to come before anybody else has a chance. We have 2 guys almost every single year take that one. There's other hunters in camp. There's more archery deer hunters and antelope hunters in camp than elk hunters. But then the 3rd week of October, the last week of October, and the 1st week of November, we have paying clients in there with the elk hunters. And yeah, it works. It's hard because I get a paying client, these guys have paid a lot of money. And I say, you have to kill a 7.5-year-old and older bull. You kill anything you want. First little thing jumps out in front of you, blast it, and you can blow our whole management practice out of it. Makes it hard to keep selling hunts when I got to tell this guy. So we have a lot of other deals you have to deal with, when you're in that situation. We have had that conversation and we're deciding right now whether we're going to do the deer, but we're leaning to just guiding both of them. And to do it, we've got to spread them out with the paid hunters. So it is something that's going to happen.
Do we have any more questions from the committee? Are we ready for?
I'd like just 2 questions quick. So for Matt and Alec, so did you, this is hard sometimes because it turns into a he said, right? So did you personally witness guides behind lock gates on UTVs, or is this just something you've heard?
Regarding what question exactly? The side-by-sides or the lock gates?
Either way,
Yes,
if they're in
both.
vehicles behind lock gates, you personally witnessed that
Yes,
go down?
yes.
Okay, multiple times, 1 time, 2 times?
So we drove past the lodge once. We got up there once. There was, I want to say 4 side-by-sides at the lodge. After leaving there, we passed a convoy of vehicles.
Sorry, I meant behind lock gates. Like you saw them driving
Oh, yes.
pickups, trucks, I don't care, behind lock gates. That's what I was asking, not specific to side by side.
Sure. Yeah, yes. The Wasatch Gate is what it's formerly known for on the ranch. We are hunting the property to the east. They kind of call it the airport area. It's right there, kind of along the line of Wyoming. We did witness there was a paid hunter. I would assume he was a paid hunter because they were guided. That was also hunting a deer out in that area, and we did see them come through that gate later in the day. I'm assuming they ran to Evanston, or I'm not sure why, but they did come through that gate on the Evanston side of things. So, yeah, to address that, I mean, if we decided to get a hotel in Evanston, that is you're 5 minutes away from being able to be on the property. If I may just add a few things why I'm at the mic. Yes, they do offer ability to camp on the ranch. It is not 20 minutes from Kilfoyle.
Hey, at this point,
Okay.
let's just answer the question.
Yeah, just the
Sure. I
question.
need to move through.
So
Just anyway, before I lose all of my train of thought, regarding what you mentioned about probably the complaints increase when the quality of the wildlife are down. And I would probably agree with that, which is why I specifically kept the wildlife management out of my complaint, though there was probably plenty to complain about, but this is probably not the meeting for that. My complaint simply indicated the fact that they had a much larger advantage with their keys, their side-by-sides, and other adjacent properties. Again, I spent years of my own life in those days. We expected a lesser quality. We didn't expect a lesser hunt. We expected to be able to have a similar experience, or at least the opportunity of a similar experience. So anyway, sorry.
But you were also able to access some areas that were behind lock gates as well, right? I thought you said you were with a friend that had a key.
No, that was not me.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, that's all.
Yeah, right. We were not the only ones using keys to the gates. Every morning there were guides coming and going. We showed up on Sunday to set up camp, and their guides and the client were coming out, and they had killed a bull the night before and packed it out on Sunday. So I don't know what to say there, and if Tom didn't know we were using gates, that's not on us. We checked in every day and said, we're going through this gate, we're going through this gate, we're going through this gate. I think we accessed at least 5 different gates, and they were aware of every single one of them when we called and checked in. And it's to say what Alex said about being disgruntled about the hunt. I didn't say one word about that. To draw this with 6 points, great. The paid hunters, they said they were 30% successful on filling tags, and they were killing a lot of bucks that were not their 5-year-old bucks. They were killing a lot of smaller ones too. Like, if we continue to kill that many bucks every year, nothing will ever catch up.
So to be fair, again, and we're coming up on an hour and this,
Right.
and we just need to make some progress. But I do want to be fair to Deseret as well, you know, and not hunting, having a rule of not hunting on Sunday that is equitable across both is not the same as packing an animal out.
Right,
And we would expect them to do everything they could
No.
to salvage an animal so it didn't waste.
right.
So, I mean, I just want to make sure that we're being fair.
Oh, it was the Saturday night hunt. You can't hunt on Saturday evenings,
Oh.
on the evening hunt,
Okay,
which they did.
okay. That makes more sense. Thank you for the clarification.
Just one clarifying question. I don't know that I felt like we got a completely straight answer. So as a general rule, is it a policy, Mike and Tom, that guides can access areas behind lock gates or not?
So to clarify your question, areas behind lock gates, the perimeter has locked gates.
Sure, I'm talking
That's it.
about areas within the ranch
That's
that
it.
are
The
not
perimeter
accessible.
the perimeter has lock gates, not within the ranch.
Okay.
There's no area inside the ranch that has a locked gate.
Mike, I guess I might add, rephrase the way he put that question. Would guides be able to go through perimeter gates that are locked
Of
that
course,
public hunters could not?
of course.
I think that's what he's asking.
So when these guys are here, you know, there was state elk hunters here, and then there was a couple of state deer guides that wanted to guide, but they wouldn't have went in that Wasatch Gate. That's completely false. They were staying at the lodge. Why would they go out the Wasatch Gate? And he really doesn't want me to pull out what that state hunter wrote about watching them guys hunt and where they were actually hunting. I'm going to keep that private. But we didn't guide on 4-wheelers and Rangers. We used a Ranger to pack out bull elk, and we'll pack out buck deer with them. We don't pack out cow elk with them. And so that's what the Rangers were used for. And that's what he saw them doing, is packing a bull elk for a state elk hunter.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience that has a comment that is pertinent to this conversation they'd like to make? Okay. No, just if there's anybody in the audience that has a comment that is pertinent to this conversation, you have 3 minutes.
3 minutes now? Okay, let me try and rattle some stuff off. My name's Oren Majinski. And to start with, I heard Mike say multiple times, with the exception of, with the exception of, with the exception of. Seems to me that there's some exceptions to the fair and equitable stuff going on. Tom said not necessarily true multiple times, but not to nitpick. I wanted to talk about, it states a lot in the rules. I went through all the rules on the CWMU, what is expected, what's not, their own rules. I'm not going to be able to cover all of them. One of them that I wanted to bring up, the November hunting. They're supposed to have access to November hunting. If there's any November hunting on the ranch, the public is supposed to have access to it. I've got it here. If you want me to read it, I can, but they were not offered that. That wasn't offered, but in the rules it states it. The transportation, yeah, there's disparities there. When they're at camp, they're directed to different areas. A lot of the people, like Matt stated, a lot of the locals or people that do hunt up there, they're afraid to come forward. Nobody wants to stand here and do this. Nobody wants to be confronted or pressured. There's been not a lot of complaints officially make it to this board, but that's because they get calls and pressured to drop it. One way or another, the locals are afraid to come up here because of that pressure. You've got a handful of guys that are brave enough to come up and stand up, and now they're worried that things are going to be made a little bit worse for them or their friends like Miles. How many complaints do you guys get here? Do you guys get or have a DWR presence, like a game warden on site or somebody to monitor that stuff during the hunts up there? I know Mike mentioned that you guys don't have jurisdiction over that, but there's public ground up there, and there is public wildlife being hunted. There are infractions that could potentially happen. I think that the map issue being just gone through, that would solve a lot of this. Where can you go through a gate? What land can you hunt? Fix the maps. That seems like a really a good place to start with stuff. Yeah, I think, like I said, there's just a lot of people that haven't had the opportunity to come before you guys, or that they don't take it. I wanted to remind you guys that you guys you have to represent the Deseret or whatever CWMU is up. That's fair. That's right and just. And just like they would like fair treatment, so do these public hunters. The public hunters are getting the scraps. They hunt to the end of the hunt after everything's been hunted. They're fighting over table scraps, and they still can't be treated fairly. Thank you.
All right, we'll bring it back for committee discussion.
I had just a few questions. First of all, Mike started out reading from what he said were the landowner rules, and I was wondering if there was a separate section for CWM rules, because it sounded like that maybe they're identical, but
You out of time. So in code, when it talks about CWMUs and in rule, it refers to them as a landowner association,
Okay.
which gets really confusing because we also have a landowner association program, but it means, it's referring to the CWMU.
thank you. To me, the word comparable means things can be compared, that they have similarities, and that they're easily compared. They're not apples and oranges, but they're similar. And I don't believe equitable and fair means equal. It means that the comparison can be fair. Now, maybe it has to drift toward equality to be fair, but the semantics of trying to parse between what's in the rule and what's in the code, I view comparable is not inconsistent with equitable and fair. I think those words can coexist without creating a conflict. It seems to me that there are three areas where it's been pointed out that there may be differences in treatment between public and private hunters. Having a rule that says no alcohol and perhaps alcohol being imbibed by private hunters. The use of side-by-sides and limiting access to parts of the ranch that public hunters don't get to use. I I am one that believes this program is the very best program in all the West. It's the most favorable to any landowner. And I operate in a lot of different places, and the CWMU program is the crown jewel. Now, the jewels need to be protected. The way they're protected is that the public hunters have a good experience. Now, I know Deseret runs a lot of public hunters through, and I don't know how many. I heard 500 maybe going forward, not counting 3 guests per hunter. I don't know how many in this past year there were, but it's hard to please everybody all the time. But I think we, speaking as a CWMU president of a few, we've got to go the extra mile to make sure that the public is treated well, or we are going to lose the jewels over time. It's a constant it's a constant compromise between finding a good balance of allowing the private landowners to have an incentive in the wildlife and an interest in rearing them and protecting them, and having a financial interest, and giving the public an opportunity, a comparable opportunity to access lands they never would otherwise. But when that gets inequitable or gets way out of balance, we run the risk of losing the program. And so my comment would be that we need to reiterate to Deseret and to all of us CWMU operators that we've got to do our very best job of making these comparable, equitable, and fair. And I don't know what that translates into in action tonight, but somehow we need to avoid, to the extent possible, these kinds of complaints. That's all I would say.
Covy, I got a quick question. Mike brought up something that I have not heard over the last 13 years, and that was a difference between the code and the rule. I understand that we have each of those, but it's my understanding that the administrative rules define the code, and we can and do, rule and adjudicate on both. Is that your understanding, or do we need to look at them maybe as different levels?
So the thing that Mike brought up is fair, and that is that administrative rule can further define code, but it can't supersede the authority of code, right? And there is a whole profession based around the interpretation of code. A lot of people make a lot of money doing that and arguing against each other about those interpretations. And so what we heard tonight was the interpretation, and Mike used the language in code to say, I believe that if you go past here, but it comes down to the argument of comparable. And I don't feel like it's my job to define that. What I feel like it's my job to say is we're here to hear about how the treatment of hunters is fair and equitable. I mean, that is our mandate as a committee. Now, it's, Mike mentioned that's as to the access of, I'm trying to remember exactly what it says in code.
Opportunity in terms of hunting area and number of days.
Hunting area and number of days. Yes, but there's a lot that plays into that. There's a lot that plays into what is that comparable opportunity, an area. I mean, and what affects that. And we also allow, CWMUs are allowed to set their own rules and regulations, and we just expect that standard to be held equitably. So there are rules and regulations that are set by a CWMU and authorized by code and rule that aren't in code and rule. Yet we would still enforce those because we allow them to set those as long as they're fair and equitable.
I think Chris defined equitable really well earlier.
Do we have any other comments from the committee?
Chad, do we have Deseret's survey results? Are those available? Because it seems like if this is becoming a chronic problem, then it should be reflected in those surveys.
Satisfaction, I've
Yeah,
got them here. And I just pulled up the last 3 years. We could look deeper. And I'll just say ranges for deer from 22 to 24. 3.7 was their low year, 4.6 was their high year. Elk, 4.6 to 4.8. Pronghorn, 4.2 to 4.8. And moose, 4.8 to 5.
Those are pretty good, in case you're wondering. And obviously, hunter satisfaction is highly correlated to harvest. Folks are happy when they harvest a lot of times. Those are.
Chad, if you don't mind, were there any public cow hunters that were upset with Deseret? I've been on the ranch like, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 times. This is the first year that I had the opportunity to go with somebody that had a tag. And the experience was a good experience. We experienced the late road closures. We packed some elk out. We had a blast. They were flexible with allowing us to bring an extra person because my daughter opted for the 2 elk tag. And when she called and asked, they said, yeah, you're right. You got 2 elk to get off the mountain. They allowed us to take an extra body to pack. So my experience is pretty limited to that. So, and it was a good experience. We were treated fairly and allowed to get where we needed to go. And I was just curious, they run 390 cow hunters through there. I would think that would be a good sample size to see if the public was unhappy about that particular hunt.
Yeah, I didn't pull the antlerless numbers, so I'm just pulling them up.
And the only reason I ask is for the magnitude, the 300, I think it was 390 or some ungodly number. I would think out of 390 folks, public guys, all there at the same time, I would think that if you were going to see something that wasn't consistent, that would be the place to see it. But
yeah, the last few years have done 310
okay,
public cow permits. Let's see. So I'm almost there. And these numbers too aren't broken out public private. It's just everything lumped together. And we don't have 24 back. So 23 was 3.9, 22 4.4, 21 4.4.
Fairly consistent overall then.
Yeah.
We should probably clarify that the survey results are out of 5, with 5 being perfect, not out of 10. So 1 to 5, I guess. Yeah, because that's probably an important piece of information.
For sure.
I guess my point for that was just that's an enormous amount of people to have on the ranch at one time, and to stay consistent with your other hunts. Like you said, those numbers are good.
I think, no, we're past that point. Thank you.
Covy,
Yes.
is it inappropriate to ask Chad or other members of the staff for a recommendation on what they think at this point might be an appropriate response to these 2 complaints?
Probably. I think at this point, it's hard, but this is the committee's decision, and the committee needs to work through this. I think obviously I said I'm a non-voting member of the committee, but that doesn't mean that I don't have a voice. As I listen to this, Chris, what you said really resonates with me. This program is hard and it's important, and I will acknowledge that Deseret has more public hunters. They're the biggest CWMU in the state. They have more public hunters. And that leads them to a lot of interactions with the public and opportunities to do well and opportunities to do poorly. Now, overall, I think a lot of things are going really well. I think that's fair. And I think there are probably a few areas where we're hearing that there's a sentiment that they feel like there's a fairness issue in the way that they're hunting. And that the way they're allowed to hunt, or the way they're allowed to access property, or the way they're allowed to be there. And there's a sentiment among some hunters that they are treated as less than somebody who bought the tag. Now, again, a lot of people, you know, and you're dealing with a lot of people. And so I think when you run that many people, you're always going to have a few that are dissatisfied no matter how hard you try. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't listen to some of this and see if there's room for some improvement.
Covy, what are the various options? Probation has been stated. What are the other options? Do nothing and then probation, or what other?
The action and options that are possible with this are in section 5A, 1 through 5. A different hunt dates really probably doesn't apply. Change in permits splits probably doesn't apply. A change in operator, probation, and or termination of the certificate of registration. Now, those are options that we can recommend in rule. And it's not mandated that we take any action as a committee, but there are some options.
We can't require that they resell it to the owners from whom two buyers before bought it in 1974. That's not I guess that's not one of the options.
Not tonight, Chris.
Okay.
Covey, can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
It was brought to my attention. I think there was one other public person that we wanted to give a comment that I guess we missed. Is it appropriate to have them, since this is a open public meeting, to have them?
If they have a comment pertinent to this section of the meeting, we'll give them 3 minutes, just like we did the gentleman before. But after that, the comment period, if we missed him after that, the comment period is closed.
My name is Justin Hanson. Thank you for taking my comment. I work with Durst Mountain and Folly Ridge CWMU, so I'm in here support of Deseret. Over the years, we've worked with Tom. Our CWMU started about the same time Tom's did. Our opinion and our experience with them is every time we call and we need advice or help or work together as a team in the northern region, they are more than willing to come and work with anybody in the group. They always come. The contribution they make to the CWMU program, agriculture, is bar none. However, they do not tell us how to run our CWMU. We are an independent entity that does our own thing. So I appreciate everything that Deseret has. We go to a lot of these meetings, they get hammered, and so does Durst Mountain. So we're here to work. We want to base things on fact, not conjecture and rumor. And we're just like Deseret, they are a premier hunting organization, and they do a lot of things for the good for the community and for the hunters. We want to mold our ranch after them. So we support Deseret and everything they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one quick thing. Well, hopefully it's quick. So to me, I've always appreciated Deseret and what it stood for. I think the Deseret do run a lot of people. They also have a lot of game because they run so many people because they have so many animals. So it's kind of like, I think I would want to have more people because then I would have more animals. I think it comes down to that. The discrepancies that we've heard tonight for me reflect on why we had to rewrite the rule this last year. Because while we had two complainants here, if you go back and read the minutes of these meetings for years in the past, there's been a lot of talk about access and how, how it's viewed that the private hunters on Deseret are able to access the area more optimally than the public hunters. And so that's why I asked Chad the question is, what in that rule went into effect this last hunting season? Because if things in that rule went into effect this last hunting season, what should happen as consequence should be much more punitive than if they didn't go into effect. Because it's laid out in rule that the hunters have to be able to access where they're going to hunt before daylight, or side by sides, or things like that. And it is a huge issue to me that the public has to go through the front door to access however many hundreds, thousands of acres, while the private or the friends of the private or those connected to the private are able to access all the easy gates. And that's a big issue, because if that comes across on all the CWMUs in the state, that is going to be a huge problem. And so I don't know what the punishment should be for this, because I guess I feel like this rule, that the rule that was passed through the public process that Deseret was a part of writing the rule, if it didn't go into effect in this last hunting season, then I think that the opportunity for punitive consequences is lessened.
Covy, the definition of probation is that it's sort of a monitor for a year or two, or what does that mean?
Yeah, probation would require the CWMU come back and talk to us next year and go through what they did to remedy the complaints or areas in the complaint that the committee deemed were valid.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, given the hour, and to me, notwithstanding the complainant's statement that they shouldn't get just a slap on the wrist, and I'm not trying to demean what we might do as that, but with hundreds of public hunters, and I think sometimes when just going through this process, I think has a salutary effect on it has it on me. It makes me want to be a better operator or president, and I think it will have on Deseret. And I don't believe that these two complaints rise to the level of probationary status. If we see similar complaints in the future, hopefully we'll have a long enough memory to remember tonight. But I'm not inclined to censure Deseret other than the self-censure that hopefully has occurred by listening to this tonight. And I would make a motion to that effect.
So we have a motion by Chris, and I'm going to try to summarize this motion. The motion is that no punitive action other than the discussion that we've had here tonight, and a remembrance for future incidents like this. Is that correct, Chris?
Close enough.
Okay. And do we have a second on the motion?
Can I make an amendment? If that's okay with Chris?
Sure.
I think you can amend a motion after, I mean, we're not following strict Robert's rules maybe, but is it after it's seconded and then see if they're amenable to an amendment?
I'm flexible. I just wanted to see if it was a possibility.
Sure.
It is possible.
I think that bringing them back next year is what I'm looking for in this whole process. Even if we're going to make no take no action, then I'd like to see them again next year and maybe, I think in good faith, have them maybe give us an update. I'd like to look at the hunter satisfaction. I don't want, I'm not trying to expand the motion to include all that. I just think I'd like to see them at this meeting next year.
I think, I'm fine with amending my motion that they come back and give us a report, but we're not calling it probation in my motion.
Okay, so that's like,
I've modified.
more
my
of a
motion.
substitute motion. Chris, do you want to just,
I'll make a substitute motion.
okay,
My motion is that we don't censure Deseret CWMU. That hopefully this conversation has reminded us all of our duty to take very good care of public hunters. And that we require them to come back and give us a report next year and provide us hunter satisfaction surveys on how they did and changes, if any, they've made.
okay, do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Mike, second. Discussion on the motion.
The only other thing I would like to I think it's good they come back, but maybe address specifically the map issue. I think that's the one thing that's most glaring to me, just making sure that's resolved.
I concur that I think that we need to be specific about some of these things. Very grateful for the public hunters bringing some of these matters to our to the forefront so we understand them. But I agree with what Chris is talking about and Mike as well. I think that the issues don't rise to the level of a substantial recommendation by this committee to cause Deseret trouble with ongoing business. But I would like to have them come back for some specific reasons. And one of those is this discussion we had about rule versus code. If we have, so the last many years, the rule has been defining what the code says. So if there's a question of what a short piece of code means, you can look in the rule because there's all kinds of definition of what that means. And it would be great to have Deseret understand that rule that we created in this committee and I guess help us to understand how they're going to modify their actions to accommodate that so that we don't have ongoing problems like this. And I certainly wouldn't want the public hunters that have come with all this effort to feel like it was in vain. This is the way that our committee has done things over the last many years, and we've seen incredible results from that. And our objective is not to shut down a CWMU, but to improve the program and make it better for the next person. Thank you.
And I'm probably going to vote against this motion, not to be punitive towards Deseret, but having served on this committee for many years, one of my gripes is always like, well, we put them on probation or we put a letter in their file, and it amounts to nothing, except the probation actually forces them to come back, and it forces them, whoever, not just Deseret, whoever we put on probation, it forces them to come back to the committee and present how they've tried to rectify things, whether it's maps or falling in with the code in 2025 or whatever. So I'm going to vote against it just because I think that there should be some kind of formal process to have that happen. And again, I've never seen a CWMU put on probation in 20 years that caused them any kind of problems. Not one problem, not one change to the CWMU, except for their voluntary assessment of themselves.
Mr. Chair, I call for question on the motion.
Yeah, with that, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion passes.
Are you sure?
There were two opposed, is that correct? Raise your hands. 3 opposed. And 4 in favor. Motion passes. So with that, we'll ask Deseret to voluntarily come back as the motion next year and discuss some of the issues that were brought up tonight, including the map and access and how we're working to provide fair and equitable opportunities. Okay. Thanks, everybody. We're going to take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back. All right, just like to thank everybody that came and took time out of their day to be here for that. And now we'll move on to the next issue that we have to address as a committee. And that is the Salt Wells CWMU, Salt Wells and Sweetwater CWMUs. And Chad, do you want to introduce that?
Yeah, so this one we combined because the operator is the same. It's Ash Jenkins. The complaints, just to summarize the complaints on Sweetwater, there was a buck pronghorn hunt. The complainant that got the public hunt didn't never get days to hunt. Then in the end of October was told that he should probably turn his tag back in to get his points back. The complainant contacted me on October 31st, the last day of the hunt, and said that Ash had encouraged him to call the division, turn the tag back in. On this one, there was only supposed to be one public hunter. There were two. Because of that, the hunter didn't hunt. He did get his points restored. Generally, that's something that we don't do, but given that there was probably a little bit of a division error there, we did that for him. Salt Wells, the complainant called me during the hunt and said that he's been encouraged a few times to turn his tag back in because the guide said that there weren't any deer. The hunter told me that he knew one of the landowners and asked me if he could contact that landowner, which I told him he could, and he did end up harvesting a buck. But in a summary of his complaint, he said that he's told there are no deer on the CWMU, so he should shoot one if he sees one. He's wasting his time being there to turn his tag back in. Told he couldn't hunt the November option until he saw on the website that it said that there was a November option. He was denied side-by-side use, and he was pushed to harvest adolescent bucks. And I'm trying to see if, yeah, there was potential that one of them would join us on Zoom. I would just add one other concern, I guess, that this brings up for the division is Sweetwater was a CWMU for 3 years. They did not renew last year. So one of the CWMUs here is no longer a CWMU. It's already done. Salt Wells there's a pretty good chance that the division recommendation, if they try to renew, that the division recommendation is going to be for not renewal. And if they do renew, it'd be at very low numbers. So I guess for me, you have an operator that has done 2 CWMUs that are potentially only 3-year CWMUs in back-to-back years. So again, with that, and they brought up the hunter satisfaction on the other one. I was glad they did because it helped me remember that I wrote them down. But just to give you a little bit background to start off on that, Salt Wells in 2023, the deer was a 2.7 rating. 2024 was 1. Pronghorn 3.5 and 3.6. Sweetwater, we can go back to 2022. So that's only 2 years for that Salt Wells has. For Sweetwater, deer was 1.67 in 2022, 4.7 in 2023, and 4 in 2024. They didn't have elk in 2022, but in 2023 it was a 4, and 2024 was a 2. Pronghorn was a 3 in 2022, and then we didn't have satisfaction ratings in 23 or 24. And then I believe, yeah, neither of the complainants are here. I believe you guys have those notes. If we want to read their emails, we can do that. Both, there's a couple people from Salt Wells. So Ash is here, and Andrew Smith is also here from the CWMU.
So we don't have neither complainant is here for either one of these. Okay.
Correct.
With that, let's give representatives for Sweetwater and Salt Wells. Make sure you state your name so we know who you are.
Ash Jenkins, operator, Sweetwater and Salt Wells. And this is Andy Smith. He guides for me and helps me.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to start with Sweetwater or Salt Wells?
You pick.
Okay. If you want, we'll go ahead and start with Salt Wells. Salt Wells, Andy guides all the public and the private hunters on Salt Wells for me. So he was coordinating the dates and everything. So I had him coordinate with the public hunter as far as when they were going to come and when they were not. I do have a statement also that of the guide that took the public hunter of what he said, and maybe I'll just let Andy mention what was talked about when he scheduled the hunting dates with the public deer hunter first, and then I'll go ahead and read the guide's account of what took place on the hunt.
Andrew Smith, thank you, committee, for giving me a few moments. What I'd like to speak to is when I contacted this gentleman to set up some hunt dates, I'd like to bring up the fact that, you know, getting a buck tag is a pretty emotional experience in and of itself, and what expectations are. Over the phone conversations I've had with this gentleman, I asked him, what kind of hunt are you looking for? What type of bucks are you looking for? And I'm going to use Boone and Crockett to kind of give you a class and idea of what we were talking about. He goes, I like a 180 plus buck. I know what's out there, and that's what I want to hunt. And I simply put to him, I've personally never seen a 180 buck on the property on the CWMU. The best bucks that I've seen average about 140 to 150. And if that's your expectation, you may want to consider maybe turning your tag back because you'll be, you know, you won't see that caliber of buck. Now, I did say after that, every blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while, right? And like, so whatever you'd like to do, we can make those arrangements and we'll hunt. It is a low deer density unit, and not to expect to see a ton of bucks. And that's the first conversation we had. Due to conflicting hunt dates and scheduling, I ended up having to have one of our other guides guide this gentleman. And throughout the course of conversing with him on the phone, his expectation was almost like he had a Henry Mountain buck tag. And this is not a trophy unit by any means. It's definitely an opportunity hunt. And if I was to draw that tag, that's how I would treat it. It was by far not a trophy hunt. So 100% opportunity. And that's what I tried to really set the expectation for. But after several conversations, he knew what was out there. He knew the landowners. He says that there's giant deer out there, in which case there might be a few here and there, but I personally have never seen one on the CWMU, and I spend quite a bit of time out there.
One thing to address the November season dates, then that was my fault on my understanding. And Daniel will probably remember, Daniel is our biologist. We had changed our season dates. We originally only went until October 31st. And we had a landowner that had requested that, and that landowner decided not to be part of the CWMU anymore. So one of the other landowners wanted the other season dates to go till November 10th. And I had let that lapse my mind that we did have the November dates. We did, once he brought that to our attention, we did change that, and he did hunt all 5 days. We're in November. So that is when this public hunter hunted. But Tyler George was the guy that ended up guiding this individual. And this is his account of the hunt, just to, and I did try reaching out to the gentleman, the public hunter, just talk to him about the experience and how everything went multiple times, and even within the last couple of weeks, and he never returned a call or text or responded to me at all, which is fine. This is in Tyler's words, which was the individual that guided him. He says, on day one, about 30 minutes into shooting light, we came across a 2.5-year-old buck that the hunter decided to pass on. About 2 hours later, the hunter was given the option to go back to chasing the deer or go look elsewhere. He decided to go after the same buck again, but did not have a shot opportunity. Throughout the rest of the hunt, we would see very limited deer and on a very small portion of the property where the deer were. The surrounding properties had very good amounts of deer and quite a few decent bucks. The hunter and his friend continued to make jokes about coming out and spotlighting the deer and elk since no one goes out there. Later the day, we came across a smaller group of deer with a small buck and one 3.5-year-old buck. he had the buck at 280 yards, broadside, perfect shot, and the hunter missed. Trying to get a follow-up shot, the hunter was not able to get on it and mistakenly, he was worried that he was going to mistakenly shoot a doe because the hunter later stated he was basically blind and could not see. And after that day, I was absolutely terrified that the hunter was going to shoot a doe or come out and potentially poach a buck or some of the elk that were around. The next day we hunted, there was a different group of 2.5-year-old bucks. We snuck in on them, but could only get to 550 yards. He says, I had brought my rifle and tripod set up to help the hunter. I had it set up for him to shoot one of these bucks, and he asked if I would shoot the deer for him. I immediately said no. His friend then asked if he could shoot the deer for him, and I again repeatedly said no. The hunter then tried getting on the deer, but could not find him in the scope before they finally went over the hill. We all went after them, but were unable to find them again. Later that day, I spotted another group of deer with a decent 1.5-year-old buck. Hunter decided he wanted to go after this buck, so we snuck in and got busted, no opportunity. Before the deer hopped the fence onto the neighboring property. On our way back, we stumbled upon a really nice 4.5-year-old buck. Due to the hunter's inability to see and other health issues, we were not able to get a shot and tried finding that buck the rest of the day, but we were unable to find him. The next morning, I spotted a 2.5-year-old buck just after first light. We were able to move in and harvest that buck. So as Chad mentioned, one of the issues on this particular CWMU ranch and one of the reasons we need to evaluate things and possibly may not renew is because there is a very limited number of deer and a very limited number of antelope as well. And so that's some of the things to consider. So we didn't want this guy to have any higher expectations. And so that's why he didn't want him to feel like he was going to kill a 180 plus buck. And so whatever other issues there are, then I don't know exactly what was going on with him, but any questions or?
How many private hunters did you have on the ranch this year?
The only private hunters this year were two landowners. That's it. And we only have 4 buck tags that typically get used.
Did the private guys kill their private tags?
I believe this year 2 of them did, and then last year I believe 1 of them did. Chad, you can check those statistics. I see if that's right, but I think that's right. And they were just the landowners. They weren't private paying clients.
There are no questions. We'll go on to this. That was Salt Wells. We'll go on to the Sweetwater.
Okay. Sweetwater was Dalton, and I communicated with Dalton. We have a very limited antelope population on Sweetwater, and so I mentioned that to him, and I says, hey, I'll give you a call, but let's tentatively plan on, in the email, I believe we had the dates of October 5th to 11th. We had initially agreed on, I believe, the 5th to the 11th, but I told him if there's some antelope that show up, I'll call you and you can come down and shoot one. Or he lives in Cedar City, and I says, if you're passing by the ranch, he asked if he could look at the ranch from the highway, which you can see most of the antelope country from the highway. I says, if you see some there and you're there and you see some, call me and you can shoot one. We had one little tiny buck antelope the very first part of September, and that was it. And those antelope left. There were no antelope on the ranch. I called him and told him that. I says, hey, there's no antelope. Just keep reminding me every week or so. If something shows up, you can come shoot it. Nothing ever showed up. So I says, hey, you can see if you can get your points back if you need to. And I actually spoke with him a couple days ago, had a good conversation. And he mentioned that the only reason that he filed a complaint was because that was one of the things that the division had asked him to do in order to get his points back. And on the Sweetwater CWMU, then we only killed 1 antelope in the 3-year period. And it was in 2022. The private hunter did kill an antelope. That was the only buck that we saw on the ranch. Public hunter came down, no antelope. The following year, same thing, public hunter came down, no antelope. I did put the private tag in a hunter's name and told him I would call him if there was antelope. He never hunted, and Chad, you can check the statistics as well. Last year, which is in 2024 season, we never even put the private tag in a hunter's name because there was no antelope. So.
Any questions for Mr. Jenkins?
Is that why you didn't seek renewal of the Sweetwater COR?
That's not the primary reason, but that I had mentioned to Chad and our biologist Kyle the previous year that if they were planning on transplanting some antelope, and for weather reasons, then it didn't take place, and so they didn't transplant any. And so I had spoken with them before the 2024 season and said that we were going to cancel them we were going to cancel the antelope portion of that if there wasn't a transplant or something, because there was no antelope. And we weren't, as Chad mentioned, we weren't scheduled to have a public hunter last year. And so we weren't worried about that. We were just not going to use the private tag if we didn't have to. And so that was one of the issues that came up.
Any other questions for either Chad or Ash?
Yeah, I've got a question for you, Ash. So I looked through this email chain between you and Dalton, and the one thing that was concerning to me is he started asking on May 23rd when he would get a hunt date, and clear up till like October 3rd, he still didn't have an answer on that. I get the challenges on the ranch, but like, why was there such a huge gap in time between communicating with him and getting him just some dates like that?
I believe I'd spoken with him a few times during that time frame that we didn't, where we hadn't set the dates officially. And so after that time, then I said, well, let's set some specific dates so that, because he basically, I kind of feel like that he thought that maybe I was misleading him, and so that I wasn't giving him hunt dates because I didn't want him to come and kill a buck or something. And with him not necessarily understanding that I really was being truthful, that if you come down, there's not going to be any antelope. And so he basically wanted to say, okay, let's set these dates in stone. I said, okay. And that's when we did the email, that email, and decided on those dates, I believe. But we had spoken over the phone a couple times, and you can talk to Dalton if you feel like. I don't know if any of you have. I spoke with him a couple days ago, and I think everything was good. So
what I'm hearing is, just to summarize the response, is that you communicated with him verbally, but didn't communicate with him with a email until later. But you
correct.
Okay.
I don't know that we need to waste a lot of time on Sweetwater. And I'm ready to make a motion on Sweetwater if everybody's ready. If they don't. And
Just really quickly
Yeah.
before we do, just to keep the process where this is an open and public meeting, is there any member of the public here that has a comment pertinent to this topic that they'd like to make? Seeing none, any other discussion on the topic? And if not, we will entertain a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we terminate the COR for the Sweetwater CWMU.
it's already terminated.
Okay, a motion to agree with the termination of the COR and the Sweetwater CWMU in a second. Those in favor? Oh, discussion on the motion.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I have one point of discussion. The division now knows that that ranch doesn't hold antelope. How will the division handle it going forward? if somebody else outside of Ash comes forward and says, hey, I want to put this into an antelope CWMU?
That's a great question, Mike, and I've got the same question. That's why I made the motion. It's a very good point.
Yeah, I'll talk to that a little bit. I know down there, like there was some farming practice changes. So with that, like those changes made it so there were less animals. So going forward, unless they change back some of those practices to draw animals in, then we wouldn't support it.
Question on the motion, please.
Yes, call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Not in favor? Hearing none, motion passes. It's unanimous. On to salt wells.
I'll start the discussion on it. I mean, I feel the same way. And actually, it'd probably be good to ask a couple questions. This Matt Douglas put some bullet points in his email, and three comments that he said that you'd made to him was that you'd told him you'd never seen a deer anywhere on the ranch. If you see a deer, shoot it, and the unit was a waste of time. Is any of that true?
No. Not there's not many deer on the ranch, but typically if you see many deer, then especially now, it's one of the landowners that pulled out. He had definitely more deer than what's on the rest of the ranch. I would say, how many acres do we typically hunt now? Probably 1,500 to 2,500 for deer. About that. Yeah. So it's like 35,000 acres. And there's, Daniel, how many deer do you think we have on us?
Honestly, box elder biologist. It is a really low deer density unit. I don't see deer very often, and when I do, it's in November when they migrate in the winter. Yeah, I couldn't guess a number, but pretty low, which is why when their renewal comes, we'll talk about reducing tags pretty significantly. So,
Thank you. A couple more questions then. So, our committee is a little bit sensitive to when hunters are told to turn their tags back in, because we'd like that solved prior to people drawing the dang tags. And so let's just keep that in mind while I talk to you about these other things here. Do you hunt with paid hunters, or do the property owners hunt on the property with side-by-sides and then the public hunters aren't allowed to?
The only paid hunters that we have taken are the antelope hunters, and we hunt out of trucks.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Any other questions on salt wells? Discussion?
Here again, I don't see this fitting into the CWMU program very well, and I would probably recommend that we shut this one down too. But I mean, I don't want to be the Grim Reaper today.
Chad, how many deer tags are they issuing on salt wells?
I think that's 10, 9 public, 1 private.
Do you have their satisfaction numbers there?
I think I said that backwards.
Is that what you started with?
I think I said 9 private and 1 public. Yeah, satisfaction, I'll get that for you. Salt wells, last year there was 3 permits that were issued, 3 hunters, 3 harvest, 1 satisfaction. Pronghorn, 5 permits, 5 hunters, 4 harvest, 3.6 satisfaction. Let's see, I have Sweetwater's on here too, so I've just got to make sure you read the right line. 23, 3 permits, 3 hunters, 1 harvest, 2.7 satisfaction. That was deer. 23 for pronghorn, 5 permits, 3 hunters, 3 harvest, 3.5 satisfaction. That's all the data I have.
Gonna say it?
I've got a question. I just have a quick question. So we had a hunter satisfaction of 1 last year. And 2 of those hunters were landowners within the unit. Yeah, I'll second the motion. I mean, it just doesn't seem like, here's the problem. You put in for a CWMU and I don't care where it is, and maybe they should do more information gathering. But people do see these as limited entry hunts. They expect something better than what's on the public ground in Box Elder County. And I'm not sure this fits, to be honest. I mean, and I'm not attacking you guys. I mean, but my point is, what are these landowners doing to help wildlife? If there's no deer on 35,000 acres, seems like you could do something, try something. And I'm familiar with the area, but I just don't think it has a place in the program, personally. I would agree with Greg on that.
And I would say that with the new CWMU rule, how there's supposed to be more information given and encouraged that it could. I mean, if we take them at their word, which we're obviously doing, like they missed a 4.5-year-old deer, 3.5-year-old deer, a few 2.5-year-old deer, and saw some yearlings in just a couple of days. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but you're saying the COR is going away anyway. So
It's up for renewal this year, so they have it to hunt this fall.
mhm.
We're debating whether to recommend no renewal if they try to renew it, or if it's just limited, very limited tags. So as a division, that's kind of where we're at, is one of those 2 recommendations.
Mr. Chair, we sort of closed the public hearing part of this, and we're now talking amongst ourselves. Are we still going?
Yeah, we got the questions and discussion. I did not ask if anyone in the public has a comment pertinent to the salt wells portion of this discussion.
Can I ask one question? The operator,
Seeing none, we'll continue with discussion.
can I ask one question?
You can ask a question.
So tell me why you would want to keep salt wells. If you've got such a limited number of tags, limited number of success, why is it worth your time and the division's time to keep that unit open?
The landowners like to keep it for the deer. Like I said, we don't do any paying deer clients. They've only used it for their family, and they just get a couple tags each year. I don't think, has there ever been more than 3 issued, Chad? Even with the private and public? I think that the private lenders usually use 2. They just use them for their own family. And then we primarily just do the antelope, just because it is a little bit more difficult to get antelope hunts in Utah and tags. We use it for the antelope. So,
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
It seems to me that this COR is going to meet its maker in one form or another here by the 1st of August, or that's the deadline for applying. Maybe you moved it up, but I think it would be excessive to prematurely terminate it in total. When there's a 90-10 split, then it's really easy to default to, as a landowner, to 10 tags, 1 to the public and then 9 to the private, even if you never intend to use the, you maybe only issue 3 of the private ones, but you just tear up the others, and maybe in some, miraculous year that there might be a reason why you're grateful to have the extra tags. But so it doesn't surprise me that they're not issuing the whole number, nor do I think it hurts the division. The issue is if they had 4 tags at 90-10, you round up, there's always going to be 1 public tag. So people are going to default to the minimum of 10. And unless Ash really wants this terminated, which if you did, you probably didn't even need to show up tonight, then I think over these complaints, it would be a little severe to terminate it it may die on its own accord or be modified appropriately in the renewal process, but for us to do so tonight, I think might be going a little too far.
I kind of agree with Tim, though. I mean, when somebody puts in for these CWMU hunts, they're looking at it as a limited entry, and if you're not having that kind of an experience, it's kind of a letdown, kind of false advertisement, I guess, by the state, right? Saying, hey, this is a good opportunity for you, potentially. And so I hear what you're saying, Chris.
Just to, not to push the point, but we have a little CWMU in Skull Valley, Tooele County, that nice county to the west of Salt Lake, you know, the one, some of you. And it's far from a limited entry unit, and we don't market it at all. We give tags away at auctions. We use it for our employees, you know, but it's nothing to brag about. Occasionally you might wander into a buck that's been in the corn pivot all summer and you didn't notice it. And it might be worth running through the combine and sexing it that way. But otherwise, we don't see them much, but it's still a benefit to our employees love it. And our family loves it because we sell all the good tags. We sell the best and eat the rest. And that's what we're doing here.
So for me, I don't know that there's enough here to go by what the rule says for currently for last year. If it was valid for last year, I would have a different opinion, but I'd move that we take no action on this.
Hey, Chad, how much time does the division spend on each CWMU just in terms of keeping it? Because I know Box Elder County's already got a lot. So how much workload are we justifying for this unit?
I think Daniel's got, and maybe I should make him talk, but he's got like 35 to 40 CWMUs, and all that public land. There's not enough time to spend a significant amount of time on CWMUs. We do the best that we can, and maybe I'm speaking for Daniel, but if you want to correct anything, you can come up.
I think this is more pertinent to the renewal of the CWMU and not the.
So, and that, I guess that's what I'd say. I mean, you guys can terminate, you can recommend to the board to terminate. The board's not going to hear this for a while. There's already, the public draw will be done by then. Like to not have a hunt in 2025 seems like it may be difficult. And then I guess we could just decide on the renewal, what our recommendation would be, but.
So I think before we move forward, the way Mike worded his comment was I move. And so we need to address his motion, which his motion was, if I understand it correctly, to just to wait out this season and do nothing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I moved to not take any action on this item.
To not take any action on salt wells. Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Dissenting votes?
Nay.
1. Would you like to get on the record why?
I just think it's going to continue to be tough. And you're going to continue to have complaints on this unit, and it might go away. And I should say, I support that for deer. Obviously the antelope, I think you've had good success. So support the antelope going forward, but the deer, I think, is going to continue to be a problem.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Tim. With that, that's all for that agenda item. Okay. Thanks everybody that came to hear the complaints, make it through there. We do have we have 2 more action items. The next is going to be a presentation by Chad, a review of the CWMUs that are up for renewal that have public land.
Mr. Chair. One of these is one in which I have an interest, and I'd like to recuse myself and step outside and check the plumbing in the men's room while that's discussed.
That sounds good.
Mike, if you can load me up. So yeah, like Covy said, this is CWMUs that are renewing this summer. There's actually only two that are actually renewing with public land in them. That's Ingham Peak and TL Bar. And you can see here that they're what species they have, the amount of acres, public acres, and then what they have as far as like TL Bar doesn't have, they wouldn't meet the acreage without the public acres in it. And it's been a CWMU for quite some time. Ingham Peak, if we took out some of that public land, it would probably drop their contiguous to under 10,000. We also have some other requests. So these are all current CWMUs that are requesting for public land to be, I don't know if added, but be included in their borders. So everybody's clear, before we can put public land into a CWMU, it needs to go through the CWMU advisory committee and then be presented to the wildlife board from your recommendations given to the wildlife board. These actually have to go through, we did our rule change and we wanted to not go through the racks. And I went back and saw in law that it actually says that it will go through the rack and the board. So these will have to go through rack and board process. But we have Blackhawk, and all of these I think have a representative here. Blackhawk's here. It's 200 acres of public land that's not accessible to the public. Prohibition Springs, this one's a little bit, it's box elder, a lot of checkerboard stuff, and they're just trying to make a border that makes more sense. And Preston Nutter too, I think on that one is it just clean up the boundary with some trespass issues that they think it'll help with. So I think maybe rather than going through all of these, it might make more sense to do one by one. So we'll start with Ingham Peak. So, and we did hear this one 3 years ago. So the public land has some accessible and some inaccessible land in it. They have 4,160 public acres and 5,410 acres of trade lands. They have 16,628 private acres. The public benefit on this would be the trade lands, as there's more private lands opened up than public. And if the public was taken out, it would cause a non-contiguous or a smaller CWMU. And I believe the operator, John Maxfield, is online if we want to hear from him.
Chad, the trade lands, are they just for big game or are they for upland game also?
So they've been, do you want it? Daniel wants this one.
So the trade lands are for big game. The same property has been enrolled in the walk-in access program for I don't know how long, but for the upland game, it's enrolled in the walk-in access program, and they do get monetary compensation for that. It's just over 5,410 acres, which is the maximum walk-in access size. They get $5,000 a year for that.
Okay, and then how many moose tags do they get a year?
One.
And are there any moose on the trade lands?
In the winter, yeah, definitely.
During the hunting opportunities?
I don't know.
Okay.
Not sure, but there is a bull on there right now. I don't know if he's there on the hunt, but.
Do you want to take it to John or?
If you asked all the questions that we have, you want to move to the next?
Could I ask just one question? Did you say that the cross-hatched areas, the trade lands are also in the walk-in access?
Yeah,
And so they're compensated.
yeah.
Is that a different species that they would be compensated for that's not in the CWMU?
Yeah, it would be for upland game.
Oh, upland game.
Yeah.
Okay. It may be easier to handle these one by one instead of confusing them. So is there anybody here from the public that has any comments about this one? Ingham Peak. Are they online, Chad?
Yeah, I think John, at least he was earlier.
John, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I don't know, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
I apologize for my connection, but hopefully I've got it worked out. The only part that I think there was a comment that if the public came out, it wouldn't meet the 10,000 acres of contiguous ground, and it's well over the 10,000 acres contiguous ground on the private. The total amount of the private is like 21,000 acres. So the 4,000 acres that comes out of the public would only drop it to 16 or so. And that's the only thing I noticed right off. That if you've got any more questions, I'd be willing to address those also.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for John or Chad? Any more questions, I guess I should say.
I guess a question would be, we heard this 3 years ago, right? Or some time ago. Has anything changed during that time that would make our decision then less valid today?
I think the one thing that we had a little heartburn back then was they didn't use those as trade lands at the time, and they were using them as walk-in access, which now they're trade lands and walk-in access. So it's kind of like I don't want to use the phrase double dipping. I wish there was a different phrase for that, but they're kind of using both programs with the same. And I think that was the only heartburn that we had at the time.
I didn't remember that we left them in walk-in access, but my memory's weak from then.
Well, and just to be clear, from the division's perspective, trade lands access it's for the species that you're trading for. And so obtaining access for upland hunting and other things would require us to use a different program. And that's just a letter of the law, I guess.
And the trade lands that we do use, those are from what I've been told, Brock, I believe, talked about it in our central rack, or higher, better country that would hold the moose, and the division doesn't, and the public doesn't get that benefit coming back. But that was the heartburn that was in our central region rack. And so I feel like I had to say that, but not gonna die on that sword probably.
Do you want me to respond to that at all, or? Okay. Does this move? Okay. So the question was, or the comment was specifically around this section of public land.
Yes.
Okay.
Because they use the ridge as the boundary.
They do. Yeah. So this is the boundary. This is public land. This is public land. That's public land.
The two below that.
Yeah. These lower ones, they're just for fence lines. There's really no deer there most of the time. This is really good habitat. There's a main road that goes up and over. This is a accessible 2-track. So the public is giving up this pretty dang good habitat, especially for moose, also for deer. This is the trade lands. It is relatively lower, relatively drier. Probably doesn't consistently hold moose at all during the hunt. There could be one wandering. It does hold quite a bit of deer. I knew this would come up, so I hunted it this year just so I could have on the ground experience. I spent one morning in the northern half, and 3-hour walk. I saw about 70 deer, 5 bucks. There's deer there. So it's not a concern for deer. It's a concern for moose, I would guess. And yeah, it's not great moose habitat.
Is this for elk as well?
Yep. Yes, it is.
Any more discussion? If not, we're looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Oh, go ahead.
I make a motion that we accept the Ingham Peak CWMU as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? All right. Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Chad, let's go on to TL Bar.
Okay. TL Bar, this one's 640 acres of public land that's not accessible. There's 4,540 private acres. The public benefit on this is that they've never tried to get the true 60-40 split. It's always been a 50-50 split. And this one, if the public land wasn't included, it would be below the 5,000 acres. Dell was on earlier, the operator. I believe he's still on too, if there's questions for him.
Any questions for Chad or for Dale on this one?
Chad, question. Nothing's changed. It seems like we heard this one 2-3 years ago. Has anything changed?
No.
Is there Dale or any public that would like to make a comment on this one?
This is Dale Christiansen. Thank you for giving us the time to look at this. And again, we appreciate your support. Again, nothing's changed with us, and we've, been running this for, I think, 12 years now.
What's the public success and how do they run their hunts? Dale?
Public success has been good. The last couple of years, that range has been a little bit hard on animals. But again, that they move in off and on the ranch fairly freely. So some of it's in timing of when they're able to, the hunters come out. If the weather's bad, they tend to get out of there sooner.
Dale, since the animals come and go quite often, as we heard in this previous meeting, do you allow your public hunters more flexibility?
Oh yeah, we work with them and have, pretty much the season when, we offer them multiple times to be able to come out. And,
Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion on the TL Bar? Hearing none, we'll call for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the TL Bar CWMU as presented.
I'll second it.
Motion by Greg and second by, Clint. Okay, call for a vote. Aye. Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Chad, can we hear the Blackhawk?
Yes. So Blackhawk is one. This one, we're going to have to explain the map a little bit here, because when I first looked at it, I panicked a little bit. All of that blue state land was purchased by Blackhawk, so that's not public land. That's not the public land that would be in it. But there's 202 acres of inaccessible land in there that doesn't have access to it. So really with how large the CWMU is, the public benefit would be that public hunters that drew this tag would be able to hunt those lands that are otherwise inaccessible. And Randall Graham from the CWMU is here.
Is there anything you'd like to say?
The only thing else.
You can take.
Let me just point out where the public lands are. It's that little square right there and that square here. And as Chad was saying, we own that piece. It's because of the way the SITLA program works, because we're taking advantage of their pay over time process. They don't have a good way to put it in our name. So it's an issue that's kind of ongoing, but we own it. They recognize that we own it, but it's just what it is. But from our perspective, it's the only reason we want to include those is just the hassle factor. You know, we have hunters that are in here, you're hunting in a contiguous area, and all of a sudden there's a little piece, you know, a 40-acre piece that you got to say, okay, don't shoot on that particular piece. So that's really the primary reason that we want to have these in, just for the ease of the hunt. And, you know, I don't know what our scores have been, but we do our best to give our public hunters every opportunity that our other ones do. So I think it's a good way to give, again, access to that land that otherwise no one's getting into.
Do you guide any private hunters?
That's an option.
So the reason why I bring that up is, do you understand that by including this in the CWMU, which I'd probably be in favor for, to hunt that legally as a guide and client, you have to obtain the proper paperwork and insurance through the BLM?
I was not aware of that.
Okay.
So when you say so we need to go to the BLM and get additional approval from them?
Yes, to guide on public lands, you have to have all the proper permitting and whatever comes with that. That said, if you didn't guide on it and it was still part of the CWMU, I'd think you'd be okay, but I'm no lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, we do guide our private hunts. So, I mean, you know, if that's an issue, then we'll just leave those out. I'm not, like I said, for us, it's not a necessity to have those in. And I'm assuming that trying to get that done through the BLM is not an easy process.
I don't know. All I know is that we have a BLM and a Forest Service rep on our rack that have continually asked that that's expressed that, so.
Well, what I could tell you, if we want to go ahead and make that change and include that, then I'll work with the BLM. And if we're unable to get that done, then obviously we won't guide on those particular areas, but I was not aware of that requirement. Any other questions?
Any questions for Mr. Graham? Any other members of the public that are waiting to comment on this? Seeing none, committee discussion.
I move that we approve this as presented.
Motion by Mike and a second.
I'll second.
Ooh, you missed it, Eric. Second by Tim. Okay. No, I assume no discussion on the motion. Just called a question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. That was Blackhawk with that. Prohibition Springs.
I'm going to prohibit myself from the Prohibition Springs.
Okay.
And this one's going to be a little bit more complicated than the other ones. So Prohibition Springs, the public land proposed to be incorporated is 6,770 acres. private land opened up to the public would be 13,770 acres. The benefits that there's a cleaner boundary for both the CWMU and the public. And as noted there, that this one's not supported by the DWR. We have a couple maps here to work off of. So this one here shows you more. This red is the current CWMU in the northeast corner of it. That purple line, and maybe this might be better if Doug Freestone's here with the CWMU. I think the purple line is what they're wanting to be included in the CWMU, and then everything to the west of the purple that's private, would be their land that they would open up to the public. But did I get that right, Doug? Or can we give Doug a chance to talk?
Sure. Doug, explain this to us, because obviously Chad's confused and I'm confused. And purple is, I see red. I'm pretty sure that line that goes through the set is the purple.
You guys should go back to the prior map. I think the one that was up first. Sorry.
While he's pointing that up, is the purple lines, are they like a road or what are they as a landmark?
The purple lines, are they a road or what are they?
Well, I don't think that.
I would think the operator would.
First off, let me introduce myself and then we can all touch on that. My name is Doug Freestone. I'm the general manager of Aramo Ensign Ranches and the Prohibition Springs CWMU operator. I've worked with Aramo Ensign Ranches and Chris Robinson for nearly the last 50 years. I can point out right now, this proposed line is a road that comes off what's known as Devil's Playground. This is a public road here that continues through here, but this is following a private road that's on a water line of ours. And then it hits into a road on mile 24, which is another way into Devil's Playground that comes around this way and joins in here. So this is basically a road all the way to Highway 30, which is here. And then it would use Highway 30 as the boundary. The current CWMU only includes these areas and not the green stuff is Sitla land. There are some pieces of BLM here, here, and here. So we're just proposing to clean up the CWMU to make a more definable boundary. I've got some points wrote down here. So we bought the Rosebud Ranch 24 years ago. In that time, we've installed 109 miles of pipeline and 84 water troughs. Prior to that, most of this property had no water. We leave year-round water running for the wildlife in this property. We enjoy seeing the wildlife and especially the antelope benefit from these improvements. Shortly after acquiring this ranch, we partnered with the DWR and the Fish and Wildlife to raise June suckers on the north end of this property. We have some ponds and water up there, and we continue to do so to this day. I want to express to you guys that we are extremely grateful for our current CWMU and our relationship with the DWR. I want to stress that this is not a commercial CWMU. It's created for the use by our extended ranching family, meaning the owners and the employees and their families on the ranch. I personally had this antelope tag last year and have personal insight to the challenges associated with it. I coordinated with the public hunter and gave him tips and access to the whole property and told him basically where the good areas were, etc. We're not seeking an increase in tags in this area. We currently have a 60-40 split of 2 tags each year, 1 public and 1 private. On the 3rd year, it's just a private tag. I would add that I think we should just do a 50-50 split, add 2 tags each year so that the public gains a tag. The reason we're asking for this variance is, we acknowledge the department's policy of not including public lands with access in the CWMU, but we ask you to consider the following. We're seeking a cleaner boundary that is more easily defined and maintained for our benefit and the public's. The checkerboard pattern is very confusing on the ground regarding orientation and the boundaries. It's very tedious and expensive to post and maintain in addition. Onyx is a useful tool to help define these boundaries, and with Onyx and the signage, we as hunters can ascertain where we're at on the property. But the one problem is even though we know that we are right here and we're here, you see a pronghorn up in here. Is he on private or is he on public? Because it's very hard to hunt in this area with this checkerboard pattern and know exactly where you're at. Even with Onyx, in the heat of the moment, it can be hard to know exactly where you're at. That being said, one of my fears is that we can create a situation where people can be very easily and unintentionally afoul of the law. They could very easily shoot an antelope that's in an area that they shouldn't be in. As it sits today, it's very difficult to post and maintain that posting. There are 59 miles of posting with 43 different corners. As you all know, every time there's a corner, you have to post it twice. It's very, very hard to do that. With the new addition, we would eliminate going around every one of these corners by basically doing this. My other point is most of these public lands, especially those bisected by the highway, are not large enough to be practical to hunt pronghorn by permits not associated with the CWMU. As you can see, the highway cuts through the middle of a majority of them, and there's just little pieces that make it really hard to define the boundary. If them pieces were hunted by the public on the other hunts, I fear conflicts from opposing groups, such as herding or even shooting things off the area you're supposed to be in by either the CWMU people or the people in the West Box Elder Hunt. One other concern we've heard voiced is the public being confused with the CWM signage regarding other species. One thought we've had, should we rename the CWMU to Prohibition Springs Antelope to more clearly define that this is only for antelope and we're not associating it with deer? And then should we develop signage that is more clear to that point? I'd like to discuss the trade lands. After discussions with Daniel Slee at the expo, you know, as it states here, we are suggesting a trade ratio of 2-to-1. As you can see, we are asking for these lands in green, all these lands in the light blue are the lands we're willing to trade. I'd also like to point out, we're willing to not only trade for antelope, as discussed earlier, it should be a trade species for species. If it's not hard to do so, we're willing to make them lands open to all hunting. You know, upland hunting, deer, elk, whatever.
Just in interest of time, this is a really good explanation. I think, does the committee have any questions for Daniel, Chad, I'm sorry, I didn't catch, I better writing down names, but I didn't. Doug.
I'm Doug Freestone.
Doug. Does the committee have any questions for Doug or?
Yeah, I do have a question. The trade lands, and maybe I just missed it, sorry. Are you opening them year round for hunting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I had one other point I wanted to make on the trade lands. I've seen some literature that states you have to post the trade lands. I would ask that we not be required to post all them trade lands. To post them would require approximately 90 miles of posting. And there's like 88 corners on them. When you consider the logistics of that's just not, it's really not feasible to do that. We would ask that maybe on Onyx or something, that they are identified as, you know, much like walk-in access or something, but not be required to. If we had to post all them, we just couldn't do it. Really, that's about all we got to say. I just want to say we are very appreciative of our current CWMU. We're appreciative of the fact to have it. We would just like to clean the boundary up. We're not asking for more permits for ourselves. We'd just like to clean the boundary up to make it more definable. Try and avoid potential conflicts down the road or situations where people could get in, you know, run afoul of the law. Just make it a better experience. So
I have a question for Daniel. Are you the biologist, Daniel?
What was that?
Are you the biologist?
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of game are we talking in the trade lands areas? Are there pronghorn and some deer, or is it mostly?
Yeah, seasonal use for deer for sure. There'd be some pretty limited resident population. I was just looking at our pronghorn collars. They use down there, mainly more in the winter, and I haven't been on those trade lands in the hunting season
And then
no.
Then Chad, I have a question for you. That was a great answer. Thank you. How does the division feel about giving an exemption to posting trade lands?
I think we'd have to say the understanding is instead of trade lands that we'd say they're walk-in access lands and probably come to agreement that we're not paying. And so we probably wouldn't call them trade lands. We'd just call them walk-in access lands without compensation for them.
Yeah. And then that would also take away any issues with, you know, the species and that.
Yeah, right. Where they're opening it up for all, I think I feel more comfortable doing it that way.
And can you say why the division is against this proposal?
I think just the accessible public land. It feels like we've taken a lot of heat, and maybe I should give this to Daniel, but we've taken a lot of heat for accessible public land over the years, and there's a lot, and especially if it's trade lands and having to post it all, like he said, it'd be hard. Do you have anything to add to that, Daniel?
Not really, just, yeah, I've heard a lot of complaints against blocking off accessible public land. And if not sure how familiar you guys are with this, but the Devil's Playground area, it's like right here somewhere. I think it's right there. Super popular deer hunting spot. People camp through all this. None of it's posted right now. So people hunt all over, everywhere for this, for deer. Not so much pronghorn, but for deer. So,
But the trade lands would only be for antelope. I mean, not the trade land, the lands we are trading to go into the CWMU would only pertain to hunting, the hunting of antelope.
yeah.
Okay.
For what it's worth, they wanted to do deer. They came with a proposal, but after lengthy discussions, they pulled that request.
Plus you say you're willing to go 50-50 split on that, right?
Yes, we're currently a 60-40, but we're definitely willing to go 50-50. That would mean right now we have 5 permits over 3 years. And if we went to 6, it would just be 2 every year instead of 2-2-1.
Daniel, okay, question to that. Can we support killing one more antelope on this property?
It's possible. There haven't been a ton of pronghorn here. They are growing for sure, but shooting one more. I mean, you could. Yeah. Not sure if it would affect quality or whatnot, but yeah, there aren't a lot of pronghorn to begin with. So
thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions?
I guess it makes sense to me sitting here now, as it does to the rest of this committee. This would be one I would encourage, that if it's accepted, that there's some documentation as to why we felt the way we did. The 2-to-1 acreage trade, the walk-in access as opposed to trade lands. These are all appealing things to us, but as Joe Public sees this, they're going to wonder what we were thinking. I'd like encourage everybody to keep that in mind.
Mike, I think that's one of the things that, just to record it, if that's the way the committee goes, that's how you'd word the motion, is to approve it with this, this, and this. And with the way the rule's written now, it allows us to do some of those things.
One more question for Daniel, if I could. Daniel, how many tags are in the Box Elder West unit for antelope? You know?
No, 30
Ballpark?
maybe. 30 to 40, a good guess, Jim. How many Box Elder West permits do we have? 40, any legal weapon, 9 archery. We're adding a muzzleloader this year to spread numbers out.
Thanks.
Yeah, the Box Elder West unit goes all the way down to the pilots. Historically, most of the pronghorn were down in the pilots by the TL bar. In the last 5 or so years, they're mainly in Grouse Creek now. And we are growing on this side of on the east side of the mountains as well. So.
Okay, before we move into discussion, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this? Seeing none. Committee discussion?
I'll start. So having been pretty vocal about not including public lands in CWMUs, this one for some reason makes sense to me, especially with the trade-offs. I mean, it's I don't know. Maybe it opens up Pandora's box a little bit. I don't know, but it feels like there's a sense of cooperation with this one.
I agree. I also like that you're trading for one species, right? Anything else, any other hunt, you can access those lands that are accessible.
The conditions of this trade would be a Pandora's box I would want to open regularly.
I know they've also made good on keeping their water on, so that's super helpful. When that water stays on, it helps everything out. That's pretty dry country.
So just a thought. So, and this is only for later down the road in this conversation, it would be
being open to public use year round, defined as what they call walk-in access for year-round use, uncompensated, however. And yeah, well, let's change the name to Prohibition Springs Antelope. I like that.
I know before you said that you wanted to address the splits.
Oh, yes. And of course, including the 50-50 split consideration for the antelope hunting that we're doing out
And
here.
Greg, forgive me, but I think it warrants mentioning the trade lands being 2-to-1 on the acreage trade. I think just to document.
That's great. Let's keep it. We'll put that in the motion. And the trade lands being a 2-to-1 split like there, approximately. Thank you.
Do we need to add the documentation about the other species being huntable on those trade lands? No, I meant on the pieces inside the CWMU.
We should absolutely. And then the public land within the CWMU, however, being open to that which is publicly accessible, being open to hunting other species other than pronghorn. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Go for it, Covy.
Well, yeah. So the motion is to support this as presented, understanding that we have a 2-to-1 trade land walk-in access thing,
Non-compensated.
uncompensated, changing the name to Prohibition Springs Antelope, with the understanding that the public land inside the unit that's accessible is still able to hunt other species, and that the private land outside the unit is open to hunting of all species year round. And that the CWMU has a 50-50 split. Do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Oh, and change the name, Prohibition Antelope. Mike is going to second that. Okay. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any dissenting votes? None. It passes unanimously. Okay. Chad, let's go on to Preston Nutter Ranch.
You ready for another one?
Hold on one second. I'm going to run outside and see if I can't get Chris.
Do you want me to wait for Chris?
Yeah, let's wait to describe it for him. It looks like everybody's standing up. Let's take 5 more minutes, Mike. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. We'll get a countdown in a second, Mike.
Yes, Salt Lake, can you please give us a countdown? Salt Lake.
You are live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, thanks for that. Chad, we're now on to the last public land evaluation by the committee, and that is the evaluation of the Preston Nutter. So if you could explain that to us.
Yeah, so Preston Nutter, currently there's not public land in the CWMU, so they're to have an enforceable boundary. They're saying they want 960 acres of private land or public land included and 960 acres of public land. I don't know how I said that or how I worded that in this, and it's like, essentially they want to trade 960 for 960. And so the public benefit would be that it would be cleaned up. Don't pay attention to this map so much as this one. This one's a little bit better. So that purple up on the top would be the private lands opened up. And these blue, so they would add those other private lands as non-contiguous with the public lands connecting them and creating a better boundary. And Clint Eastman is here. He's the operator of it, so he can probably explain it better than I did.
Okay. Clint, would you like to explain that for us?
I'm Clint Eastman. I'm the operator for the Nutter Ranch CWMU. I'm going to pick this up. Sorry. So like Chad said, I am proposing to change or exchange these lands that are to the north and non-contiguous with the CWMU for these blocks here that would make a contiguous boundary on this kind of lower elevation ridge. This is accessible. You can almost probably see there's a road that runs through this. This is the Cold Springs Wildlife Management Area. So they're almost adjacent. This is incredibly hard to get to. You either have to hike from the Green River out of Desolation Canyon, or you have to hike from Cedar Ridge, which is here. The nearest access point is at this corner. And you have to cross two canyons that are 1,500 feet deep and mostly cliff to access those pieces. Any questions for me?
Can you access that other land that little bridge would, if you were coming in from the other direction, how easy is it to access that bottom public piece?
Let's see, which piece is?
Yeah.
Down here?
Nope, over to the left, keep going, right down, yep. Where you cut that gap off.
Oh, that gap right there?
Yeah, so coming from the other side, how would you access that?
For
The BLM land.
the BLM land?
Right, for our.
No, I'm just saying a public hunter, how hard is it to come up from the bottom side?
From down here?
Yep.
Oh, there are no public roads. There is zero public road from here to Green River, the town.
Mhm.
You have Turtle Canyon Wilderness, Desolation Canyon, the Green River, and then Last Chance to the south. There is no public access unless it's fly-in. The nearest public road is here.
So then okay, you'd be blocking that off for that access coming in from the north? Because there's that gap between the land, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Could you, I can't read the legend, the blue are public lands you want to include in the magenta or private lands you want to trade?
Yes, sir. Well, the blue is the public land that I am asking to trade for.
You want to use those in the CWMU, the blue?
Yes, sir.
And in exchange, you're proposing the purple or the magenta?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
What species are we hunting in the CWMU?
This is elk and deer.
And sorry if someone already asked this, but what's the elk hunting like on the purple trade lands?
In the purple trade lands, it is probably close to 8,000 foot elevation. It's right on the edge of the kind of the rut area. You're just in the aspen belt at the lower edge, and it's, I honestly don't know. I've never hunted it.
We do have, if we have more questions, we also have Brad here, who's the biologist on the unit. If we have questions for him as well, we can ask those.
How long have you been a CWMU that has operated with the two non-contiguous parcels?
2025 will be the first year. It's never been included before this year.
Okay. With the new rule change.
Yeah, with the new rule change, I thought I would try this.
Mike, I didn't understand your question. What's the non-contiguous land that's being included?
It will be the red to the right of the blue.
Oh, the red to the right of the blue. Okay. I saw the packet, but it didn't stand out. Thank you. So up until now, that dog leg off to the east was never a part.
You have a question for Brad, Tim?
Yeah, is Brad up for a question? Brad, I'd like to get your thoughts on this.
You bet.
Generally.
Brad Crompton, Division of Wildlife biologist that oversees this CWMU. As you mentioned, the elevation is similar. The purple, the trade lands, there's a county road to it, so it's more accessible to the public, where that is not very accessible from a road. There is a public that uses the surrounding areas, the hardy in nature that hike the 4,000 feet up from the river, or there is that interest in it. But yeah, the hunting opportunity on both those pieces are very comparable. Just due to the nature of most of our access being on the north end, obviously elk figured that out after a while, but it's much better October, November than it would be in September, just because of kind of that 8,000, 8,500 foot elevation.
I got another question with that same little gap. If we traded that, does the public still have access to walk through that? Say if I had a tag, could I walk through that piece?
I can answer that. Most definitely. If it's you, the only thing that a CWMU conveys is a hunt unit. And so it would be like walking through another hunt unit to get to your hunt unit. So,
Okay.
I mean, so the answer is legally yes.
Just don't shoot anything while you're walking.
So
That is accurate.
kind of along those lines, are there really two issues here? One, a variance to have non-contiguous lands, and two, to add public lands, or did some rule change make it so that by rights they get the non-contiguous lands without a variance?
So the new rule would allow that land to be in there even if it is non-contiguous.
So even if they didn't get the blue parcels,
They can include the red.
uh-huh. But we're not opining on the non-contiguous. That's not what's before us. It's whether to allow the trade lands.
Yes, it's whether to allow the blue to be included and the purple to be traded. Okay, we'll go to any comments from any members of the audience. Seeing none, committee discussion.
So I was reached out to by a person who uses that blue area to hunt and uses that as access. I personally would hate to be the hunter walking through a posted CWMU during the deer hunt with a rifle on my shoulder and having to confront the CWMU landowner or a CO. Understand that you can drive through one, but if I feel like that's opening up for a recipe of disaster. I personally can't support this because I know that the public do use those general areas. And I mean, I appreciate the willingness to do the trades, but that's accessible public land. And I know for a fact that it's being accessed. And so I couldn't support this.
Mike, would you support adding the ones that don't block the access? The one piece that keeps that bridge open, would you support adding the other three? I don't know if the operator would go for that. But.
Well, if you look at it, the two on the perimeter are accessible. And then there's just the one small rectangle that is inaccessible. You know, I just feel like that, unfortunately, in this case, I don't see the public benefit to do it.
To that line of thinking, Mike, what would you think if you excluded the right blue piece, included the two middle ones, excluded the right half of the left one so that there's continuity, and included part of the left one?
Well, I
Excuse
think that on Steer Ridge, I think the left half of the left blue probably would be where you could shoot an elk. Probably it's not as, it's more flat, it's less cliffy. So I don't know. I would probably be against it just for that reason. There again, the lower middle one's accessible. It doesn't look like it's much more than what, 100 acres. I don't know. Maybe that could be a compromise to do the two middle ones for the trade lands. That could be a possibility. I didn't really think that far into it.
Those ones, the southern boundary of this, that yellow, that BLM, is that roaded? Can you get around there? Or is that kind of a hike in real rugged canyons and cliffs and things?
On the eastern dogleg part, or just in general?
I mean, the south boundary of all those blue parcels, can someone easily approach them from the south through BLM, or is that
there are no roads from their south. It's canyons that are several thousand feet deep.
Yeah, there's a pretty good road, a private road right on top of Steer Ridge, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Which one is Steer Ridge?
Steer Ridge is the mixed red and blue section.
That's kind of the point, is there's so much cliff out there, but then this is one of the areas that's not as cliffy, but it actually holds animals. So
I see. It says Steer Ridge.
Yeah. I don't think it's probably the best hunting in the world. I think it's just one of those things where people want to use it and get away, and they do. as Brad said, I mean, people hiking from the Green River, that's a 4,000-foot elevation gain. That's, and there's some big cliffs. I think be a pretty good man to go do it, you know, but
It's difficult.
it is. And it's possible. And I think that's my point. So I think I've said enough.
What about the BLM parcels to the left, that some little ones that you don't have highlighted? Are they already in the CWMU?
That are inside
Like
the,
at Gooseneck or right there, or there's a 240s on their end to the left of the Steer Ridge Road. Or maybe I'm just reading the color wrong. It looks like there's a couple of little BLM parcels in the heart of it.
so if you're talking.
Those two and then the one up above, that one.
Yeah, if you're looking at those that are embedded, this map is not accurate or updated. Those are private lands. They became private lands probably in 2013 under the disposal that the BLM was going through.
Well, if there are no more questions and no more discussion on the CWMU, we'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion. I motion that we accept the proposal, except with the piece that gives access to the ground to the south, the BLM pieces to the south. And include the two accessible for the trade lands to the north that are accessible on that piece.
Let me make sure that I understand the motion before I ask for a second. The motion would be to not accept the far left blue squiggly, but to accept the other three blue pieces for the trade lands. Okay, that's the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Chris. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why they're keeping the one to the right. It's because it's good hunting. And so we're giving up the public accessible hunting. And I understand we're gaining some to the top, but I don't know if that's the right thing to do.
Are they giving up more than they're getting if that pulls out? What's the ratio of, if you took that that lightning bolt, I'll call it, on the left, you pull it out, how many acres in blue and how many acres in purple?
The on the far left in blue, I believe is 440 acres. Then the purple is 960.
And you were pretty well balanced before? Blue to purple were balanced?
Yes.
So now you're at about 2-1. If this motion were to pass, you'd be committing all the purple and only getting half as much blue. Is that right?
That's right.
Is that palatable to you?
For me, I think this is an all or nothing. My interest is more in reducing the amount of posting that I'm going to have to do on this and kind of trying to clean up some issues that we have on that piece of ground. So
I know that posting will tax you there on that lightning bolt.
Absolutely, yes.
And I guess you got a lot of other land, you better get started early.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's
Mike, do you want to ignore that reboot
ignore this.
for somebody? There we go. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. We'll call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
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 Okay, motion fails. 3 in favor, 4 opposed. Do we want to record the reasons why? Mike, do you want to start?
I think I've said it. It's a publicly accessible land that's being used.
Accessible public land. Greg?
Yeah, same.
Same. Eric?
I think we just ought to either accept it or reject it on the merits that it was presented rather than trying to piece it out. Because
Okay,
it seems like that would create more confusion than they had to begin with by bringing part of it in, but keeping the other part out. So just say all or nothing.
okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all or nothing on that one.
Okay.
So the question is, if there were a motion saying approve it as written, would the outcome be the same? Because our motion before that was voted down wasn't going to fly anyway, because he was basically withdrawing his motion.
But do we have an appetite for another motion?
That's the question.
That's the question. And I just asked it. Do we have an appetite for another motion?
You could call on someone to make one.
Or it fails, yeah, or it fails for lack of a motion.
I'll make the motion just so we can vote again.
Okay.
I don't know if I'll get a second motion that we approve it as presented.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. I think we've had enough discussion, so we'll just call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
I hear 2. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion fails, and I think we've recorded the reasons why. Okay. Thank
Are
you.
you ready for our favorite motion?
We're not done yet. We've got one more variance request we're gonna hear. Chad, could you present this before we lose Chris?
I don't know. Okay, we have a variance for Blackhawk. So currently Blackhawk for elk, they have a variance that goes till November 30th. The elk migrate pretty late on this place. So they're just asking to extend that out till December 15th. They feel like that would cover that migration for late years when the snow hits late. And Randall is still here. He's a trooper tonight.
Randall, would you like to say anything on this?
Yes. So just a couple of quick comments on that. And by the way, Randy is what I go by, and I'm the owner operator of this particular property. The reason we're looking to do this CWMU has been in place for about 8 years. In those 8 years, there's been one bull that's been taken outside of the November timeframe. So we currently go from September 1st until November 30th. What we want to try and do is just shift that 15 days. Start September 15th and December 15th. And again, the reason for that is when the snows come late, this is primarily a winter range, the elk push in late. In a good year, all of our hunts, as I just explained, take place kind of between the 1st of November and the end of November. If that snow is not good, then it gets compressed and we end up getting, either hunters that are not satisfied, not getting good experience, or we end up rescheduling and compressing everybody to the end. What we'd like to have is kind of this safety valve there, that when it comes late, we can still, same number of hunters, we're not changing any of that, but just have the ability to expand that 2 weeks so we don't have people hunting on top of each other. That's really what we're trying to accomplish.
How many elk tags do you have?
We have 9 private and 1 public. And then this year we also, through the association, we did a disabled hunt. So we had an additional one.
Any questions for Randy?
Do we do that extension on any other units?
Seems like that's a question for Chad.
Currently, the latest we've had an extension is November 30th.
I would like to hear Brad's thoughts on this.
Kind of validating the late migration. We have collar data on a lot of cow elk over the years, and just survey data tends to be, bull heavy, and the bulls come in once the snow flies. In addition, a lot of this acreage, there was that wildfire a couple of years ago that kind of changed the dynamics of migration down in there as well. But yeah, elk show up late on winters like this when it doesn't snow, and yeah. So
Does that cause other problems though for managing that herd though, where you're killing bulls that may spend some time on limited entry units? Not all of those bulls will be on limited entry units in other times of the year though. Does that make sense? Is it going to change? Are you already accounting for that? I just wonder what impact that has on your overall management where you're pushing this hunt later.
Not much. I think this is more opportunity for there's a good opportunity for the public hunter. These elk are coming. This is a very complex unit. It's on 3 different management units on the 9 Mile, the Wasatch, and the Manti. Most of the migratory elk are Manti elk, and many of these bulls, we don't radio collar many bulls, but many of these bulls may come from public lands that have made it through all the other hunts, but it hasn't complicated that at all. We account for that in our totals. So.
May I ask a question there? There aren't any private lands up migration from this CWMU that would be affected by allowing a late season hunt. And I'll give you an example. We think on one of our CWMUs, we forbear shooting a lot, have a low harvest rate to grow some big deer. But if our neighbor lower down in the winter range said, oh, great, we'll get a lot of those deer that my neighbor upstream didn't harvest, and we'll shoot them late season in the rut. Be terrific. Let's do that. But there's not a situation like that where somebody's coming up short, where this late harvest is affecting someone else's upstream.
A valid point is, I believe, there's several CWMUs and public lands upstream, for lack of a better word, above them in elevation. I don't think this changes how many we harvest at all. It's just that time frame of when people have access.
Did I make one comment? Just kind of like Brad just said, I don't think this is going to have a dramatic change on the number of animals harvested. It will just make it so it's not so compressed. Like I said, what happens if they come in late, then all of the hunts get compressed down into kind of a 2-week period instead of over a 4-week period. But we've had a very high success rate. Even in the years when we've had to compress, it just makes for less than ideal hunting situations.
Brad, can I ask you one question? Would you support this, pushing it out this 15 days?
Yeah, put me in a pickle here. I thought that was you guys' job.
You can plead the 5th.
We're looking for a scapegoat, Brad.
The only concern is Pandora's box. If everyone wants this, it makes complete sense here. But yeah.
It's just for for elk, no mule deer.
No, mule deer is a different rule that, November 10th is as late as you can go. So.
Probably a question for Chad and or Covy. As I read through the rule here, there's no discussion about, it doesn't even talk about extending into December, but it does talk about extending into November. Can we really do this without maybe violating the rule?
Yeah. Should we give it to Covy instead?
Yeah, let's give it to Covy.
I'll pull up that rule. Do you have that rule in front of you?
Yeah, you bet. It's 37-13 season lengths. It talks about it in several locations there. it just talks about, you know, a CWMU that elects to extend season dates into November, allows public hunters to, and Wildlife Board may authorize bull elk hunting season variances only if the CWMU Association can clearly demonstrate that November hunting is necessary on the CWMU, and if the Wildlife Board approves it. We haven't done it. The rule doesn't really talk about it.
Yeah, and I remember.
I get the concept, but I'm not, this one is kind of a Pandora's box that I'm nervous about.
Yeah, and I remember talking about it in the CWMU Rural Committee, and
yeah,
we didn't pass it, but
it was offered. We actually offered that CWMUs could go to like the 15th of February, and they said no. So
yeah, so we kind of didn't put it in rule because there didn't seem to be an appetite from CWMUs. So with that being said, I guess that's where I don't have as much heartburn as if it happened, and I don't want to ever go against rule. Like that's not good policy. But I don't think there'd be a lot of CWMUs that would ask for this. Maybe I'm wrong.
That Romanet 4 that was referenced, that Greg referenced, that doesn't preclude doing it another sign. It just says if you want to go into November. But if you do, maybe you can disallow public hunters if you do it in December. I mean, I'm not saying we would do that ever, but it's sort of implying that November is the furthest you can go, but it doesn't say that.
Yeah. Should have brought our lawyers here tonight.
When Chad says it's not good to go against rule, we don't go against rule. I want to clarify and state that on the public record. If we have a problem with a rule that doesn't work, we look to modify the rule and make it work. But
and the way 2A reads it, they have to clearly demonstrate that November hunting is necessary. It doesn't even give an option for December. Not saying that it's a bad idea, but it doesn't even give that option.
yeah, as Chad, as we read this, and as Greg pointed out, I don't know that we have the option to allow this for bull hunting right now.
So we probably have to do a rule change.
If we were going to allow it.
So what would be the process?
The good news is that's usually a pretty long drawn out process. So it's been brought to our attention, I think in Chad's attention, and this rule was just open less than a year ago, which means the next time if it's evaluated on the normal cycle, I believe it's 3 to 5 years. So it's the CWMU rule. Yeah. So it just doesn't mention December hunting at all for bulls. It's not completely unprecedented, but it doesn't mention that the CWMU program allows for that. So before we make any motion on this, let's take this back and talk with our AG's office.
So are you wanting to table this?
A motion to table this.
I'd make that motion.
I second.
And with that, a motion to adjourn.
Well, we got to take a vote on that motion to
Oh.
table.
Let's vote.
Aye. I move we adjourn.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.